This guy's life is straight up trash. He gets reincarnated into a demonic clan where he's treated like absolute garbage. For 18 years, he's nothing but a joke until he finally gets a system, and the very first thing he does is clap the terrifying Empress. The one whose name alone makes the entire continent shake. But instead of fixing his life, everything only gets worse. His system keeps pushing him into fights with the worst possible people, and now everyone's out to get him. His system turns his life into a complete disaster, and it all started 18 years ago. The main character ends up in a different world where he finds out he has 38 mothers who are all very kind. To stay safe and grow up without trouble, he has to make sure he only gets a score of 1 on every test. He's afraid that if he does better than his older brother, who has some intellectual challenges, his stepmother might try to get rid of him. Ling grew up in a respected group that works to help people. He has a very successful father and dozens of mothers. Every day, he also has to look after his stepmother's assistant, worrying that she might give him too much credit or rewards. When he returns to his tiny, messy home that's in worse shape than an outdoor restroom, he smiles to himself because he successfully made it through another day. However, things are about to change. After 18 years of struggling, he finally saves up 300 low-grade spirit stones. He decides to activate his system. His profile shows his name as Ling, his race as human, and that he is at the second layer of the Foundation establishment stage. Once the system detects enough stones, it asks if he wants to turn it on. He says yes without a second thought. When the interface opens, it looks just like an old Windows 95 window, which really surprises him. Even though the style is a bit weird, he figures it's better than nothing. He looks through his options and finds the only skill he can learn right now, the iron bone technique. This is a very intense style of training that can be dangerous for anyone without a strong will. When he sees that it takes 10 years to master, he's disappointed. He doesn't want to spend decades training after already struggling for 18 years. Then, he notices a one-click training button that looks like it has some special features. As soon as he clicks it, a strange energy fills his body. The system tells him that it's taking over to handle the upgrade automatically. It warns him that he'll lose control of his movements during the process and tells him not to panic. Soon, his body starts training on its own, and he feels a rush of pure energy. He thinks the system is actually great until it sends a message saying he's missing some specific pills needed for the training. Ling knows these pills are rare, and even the leaders of his family don't have many. He wonders where he's supposed to find them. Suddenly, the system says it will provide 10 of these pills for free. He's excited, thinking it's a newcomer bonus. But then, his body stands up, kicks the door open, and starts running toward a specific spot. He's panicked because he spent 18 years trying to stay hidden, and now he's running through the courtyard out in the open. He realizes he's heading toward the home of a dangerous leader. He begs the system to stop and just take a quick look, but instead his body kicks down the front door. He yells for himself to stop as he charges toward the main house. The system pauses for a second, making him feel relieved, but then it punches through the door, leaving him feeling hopeless. This room belongs to a leader known for being very aggressive, even toward his own family. The system doesn't care, though. It makes him walk over to a cabinet and open a drawer where he finds a bottle of the pills. The system then claims it has successfully gifted him the items. Ling realizes the system is just stealing them, but he's forced to swallow them and start training right there on the spot. He feels exhausted by the situation, but the pills are actually very effective. His training speed increases 10 times over. He can feel his power growing quickly, and he soon reaches the third layer of the Foundation establishment stage. He manages to achieve things that others find nearly impossible. When the system finishes and asks for a 5-star review, Ling is so annoyed that he gives it a 1-star rating instead. While he's feeling a bit of satisfaction from the bad review, he suddenly hears a woman laughing nearby. He turns around nervously and sees a woman who seems to have appeared out of nowhere. She invites him to join her in a deep spiritual journey. Seeing her reach out toward him, he gets a cold sweat and tries to back away. Thanks to his new strength from the breakthrough, he's able to jump over the back wall to escape. Just as he thinks he's safe, a creepy voice from behind asks what the 7th young master is doing there. Ling had just managed to get away from Zhen Jinshan's place when he ran into a family servant. The servant told him to get to the main hall immediately because the head of the family had an important announcement to make. Ling nervously asked if Zhen Jinshan had come back yet. The servant snapped at him, saying that he hadn't returned, and warned Ling not to waste time unless he wanted to get in trouble with the family. Ling quickly took off, thinking that Zhen Jinshan must have gone straight to the hall, which meant he didn't know about the stolen pills yet. He knew the PEI clan was very strict about their rules. If someone skipped a meeting without a good reason, the family would send experts to track them down. When he arrived at the hall, he saw Zhen Jinshan sitting in the guest of honor's seat, while the clan head sat next to him. Ling tried to blend into the crowd as the group gathered. Zhen Jinshan announced a new mission, explaining that a traitor named Wu Tingji had escaped to Mount Yuanlao. He told everyone to go search for him and promised a reward of 50 bone-tempering pills to anyone who found a lead. Ling was shocked by the massive reward, and even the clan head seemed surprised by the generosity. When the crowd didn't move move fast enough, Zhen Jinshan got angry and asked why they were still standing there. The clan head quickly stood up and explained that they were worried because the traitor was at the 7th layer of the Foundation establishment stage, while their own disciples were much weaker. To a powerful leader like Zhen Jinshan, that level was nothing, but for the PE clan it was a huge threat. Even the clan head had only just reached that same level, whereas Zhen Jinshan was way ahead of them all. Zhen Jinshan told them not to worry, saying that the traitor was badly injured and that even a regular person could probably catch him. He clarified that he only needed them to find the man, not fight him. He then showed them a magical image of the traitor so they would know who to look for and told them to signal him once they found a trace. Pei Ling was secretly happy about this. He planned to use the mission as an excuse to leave the city and run away forever. Meanwhile, Zhen Jinshan went back to his home, but instead of going to his room, he went to a creepy cottage in the back decorated with skull wind chimes. Inside, a woman coldly asked if he had found the person yet. Zhen Jinshan tried to explain that the traitor had escaped with a secret manual, but she cut him off. She called him useless and warned him that if he didn't find the manual within 3 days, she would use his soul to power her magical tools. Pei Ling followed the others to the mountain, but he was focused on his escape plan. He intended to head to the next city, put on a disguise, and join a traveling group to disappear for good. However, as he was running, his legs suddenly went weak and his body felt freezing cold. He had never felt this way before. He fell to the ground, realizing it must be something the woman from the creepy screen had done to him. Feeling his mind getting foggy, he quickly called out for the system to start training. Once the system took over, his will became incredibly strong. He let out a roar and mentally fought off the female ghost's influence. He felt safe as long as the system was active, but then a notification popped up. The system warned him that his energy was dangerously low and that continuing would cause permanent damage. To help him out, the system said it would provide 3 vitality pills for free. Pei Ling was terrified because he knew what free meant by now. He tried to tell the system not to take them, but his body turned around and ran right back toward the mountain. In a hidden cave nearby, an old man was feeling miserable and pulled out his last bottle of vitality pills. Just as he was about to take them, Pei Ling appeared, snatched the bottle and swallowed 3 of the pills instantly before tossing the bottle aside. The system announced that the pills had been delivered and went back to training. Pei Ling sat down to meditate right there. The old man was furious that his last pills were stolen and that someone was casually training right in front of him. He lost his temper, grabbed the empty bottle, swallowed whatever was left, and tried to hit Pei Ling over the head because someone was attacking him. The system stopped the training and asked Pei Ling for another 5-star rating. Pei Ling was beyond frustrated, thinking the system was anything but helpful. As Pei Ling watched the old man's rage boil over, he was about to beg for mercy. However, before he could say a word, a powerful strike sent him flying 60 feet through the air. When the dust finally settled, Pei Ling was paralyzed on the ground, staring in shock at the deep injuries on his arm. His mind raced as he realized how strong the old man actually was. He knew that if he didn't find a way to stall for time, he wouldn't survive the encounter. Meanwhile, the old man was surprised to see that Pei Ling had managed to block the attack with his arm. Using a special technique to inspect his opponent, the old man discovered that Pei Ling had developed an incredibly strong physical defense. Suspecting that the boy must have found some rare treasure or secret training, the old man demanded to know how he had achieved such a powerful body. Pei Ling, terrified, immediately started apologizing. He told the old man he truly regretted taking the pills, but he honestly had no idea why his body was so resilient. Pei Ling hoped he could talk his way out of the situation, but the old man's next question made things even worse. He asked if Pei Ling had come into the mountains specifically to hunt him down. Pei Ling panicked and shook his head, knowing that admitting to being a bounty hunter would mean the end of him. Instead, he decided to tell the truth about his earlier trouble, explaining in great detail how he had stolen the pills from Zhen Jinshan. The old man was stunned by the story. He couldn't believe a kid would be bold enough to steal from someone as dangerous as Zhen Jinshan. Pei Ling acted shy, joking that it was just youthful recklessness and that everyone makes mistakes. He added that the leader probably hadn't noticed yet because he hadn't been back to see the mess Pei Ling left behind. Seeing that the old man was starting to believe him, Pei Ling tried to act friendly, suggesting that since they both had the same enemy, they were practically on the same team. The old man pushed him away in disgust and asked why, if they were on the same side, Pei Ling had stolen his last pills. Pei Ling explained that he was desperate, mentioning the strange screen with the woman's image he had seen at the leader's house. The old man's face went pale. He asked if Pei Ling had really looked at the seductive ghost painting and expressed shock that the boy was still alive. Pei Ling admitted he had seen it and explained that he'd been haunted by ghosts the whole way there. He claimed he only took the pills to save his own life from the painting's curse. The old man nodded to himself, realizing that someone at Pei Ling's level would definitely need extra energy to survive that kind of dark power. His expression shifted into a sneaky grin, and he suggested they make a deal. He pulled out a valuable secret manual and offered to share the technique if Pei Ling helped him escape the mountains safely. Pei Ling looked at the manual and acted unimpressed, asking if that was all he had. This made the old man furious. He shouted that this was the very manual Zhen Jinshan was willing to do anything to get his hands on, and that his entire group had been targeted because of it. As the old man held the scroll and complained about his situation, a notification popped popped up from the system. It detected an unknown technique and began recording the information. Pei Ling was surprised and impressed that the system could do this. The recording was slow, so he did his best to keep the old man talking to buy more time. The old man noticed Pei Ling's anxious look and gave him a playful slap on the head, thinking he had finally intimidated the boy. He tucked the scroll back into his pocket, completely unaware that the system had already finished copying every word. When the system asked him to name the new skill, Pei Ling didn't want to waste time thinking, so he just called it the nameless cultivation method. Now his only goal was to find a way out of there as fast as possible. Pei Ling acted like he was helping the old man, but then he suddenly turned around and pointed, shouting in shock that Zhen Jinshan was standing right there. Wu Tingxi was so terrified that he completely lost his composure, literally wetting his pants. Pei Ling took advantage of the distraction to sprint away. By the time the old man realized he had been tricked, Pei Ling was gone. Furious, Wu Tingxi yelled about the kid's deception and fired a beam of light toward him. Pei Ling ran blindly through the woods until he hit a dead end. As he saw the old man closing in, he did a quick calculation. His body had mostly recovered, while the old man was only at about a third of his full strength. He realized he could actually win this fight. With an angry shout, Pei Ling used a powerful shoulder throw to slam the old man into the ground. Seeing that Wu Tingxi was barely holding on, Pei Ling quickly finished the job. He gathered up the secret scroll and the pills before turning to continue his escape. However, that familiar feeling of weakness washed over him again. Remembering the curse the old man had placed on him before dying, Pei Ling realized he had no choice but to go back to the PEI residence. He planned to trade the scroll to Zhen Jinshan in exchange for breaking the poison's hold on him. When he arrived, he found out that Zhen Jinshan wasn't there, but someone even more terrifying was. Compared to her, Zhen Jinshan was like a tiny insect. This was Li Liu, the future leader of the powerful Chongming sect. Even though they had been arranged to marry when they were kids, the gap between them was huge. She was already at the peak of the Golden Core level, while he hadn't even reached the 4th layer of his stage. With just a single look, her powerful presence forced Pei Ling to the ground. To save himself, he quickly confessed everything to her, hoping she could remove the ghost poison. When she asked where the traitor was, Pei Ling told her that Wu Tingxi was already gone, and that he had hidden the secret scroll in a safe spot. Looking at his serious injuries, the woman could tell he was telling the truth. She tossed him a bottle of pills and told him that if he meditated after taking them, he could clear the cold poison from his system. As for the curse, she said Zhen Jinshan could remove it once the scroll was retrieved. Then, she vanished instantly. Pei Ling felt relieved to be out from under her pressure, but his curse flared up again. He knew he had to hold out until she returned, and his only hope was to let the system take over. He opened the familiar menu, and remembering his previous experiences, he chose the nameless art for automatic training. As the system's voice confirmed the start, he felt that familiar sense of comfort. Meanwhile, Li Liu successfully found the secret manual, but as she went to check it, a sudden attack lunged out from the pages. Luckily, she was fast enough to dodge it. The manual floated in the air and slowly turned into the ghost of an old man named Luo Chao, a former elder. She hadn't expected a piece of his soul to be hiding inside the scroll. When he attacked, she stayed calm and used her energy to summon a giant, fierce serpent. This was a special spiritual lock designed to trap ghosts. The old man was caught and couldn't escape. Realizing he couldn't win, he decided to self-destruct his soul to take her and the manual down with him. Li Liyue didn't expect him to be so extreme. She jumped forward, risking everything to grab the manual right as he exploded. She managed to save the scroll, but the blast from such a powerful spirit left her seriously injured. She needed to get back to the residence to recover quickly. However, she had no idea that back at the house, Pei Ling's system was about to get him into trouble once again. At the same time, Pei Ling was busy training with the nameless art and was secretly enjoying it. He never expected that practicing this technique would feel so amazing. Suddenly, a notification popped up from the system explaining that the nameless art was actually a partner-based training technique and required another person to continue. Since it detected that he didn't have a partner, the system announced it would provide one for free. Pei Ling was speechless, realizing he was about to get into trouble again. The system took over his body and started running fast, making him feel like his head was going to explode. He cursed the system, feeling like it wouldn't stop until he lost his mind. He worried because in the PEI residence, almost everyone around was a family member. The system quickly reached its destination, and to his horror, it was the courtyard belonging to the Saintess. Pei Ling held onto a tiny bit of hope, wondering if the system had made a mistake since he thought Li Liu was still outside the city. But a second later, the system pushed the door open and marched straight in. Pei Ling was in a full panic. He sarcastically told the system it was amazing and that they were definitely going down together. Inside, Li Liu was trying to heal her injuries. She noticed someone outside but didn't think much of it. Assuming it was someone coming to help her with the curse, she calmly told the visitor that she would see them in a moment, but the door was suddenly kicked open with a loud bang. The system even made him strike what it thought was a cool pose. Li Liu was furious and immediately launched a powerful attack at him. At the same time, Pei Ling's body threw a jade green pill he had taken from Wu Tingxi. The pill exploded, filling the room with thick smoke. It turned out to be a special soul-suppressing powder, the traitor's secret weapon that had somehow ended up with Pei Ling. Because she was already exhausted and injured, Overpowered, Li Liwei collapsed and lost consciousness. Pei Ling was shocked that she went down so easily. He wondered if the system was just that strong or if her injuries were worse than he thought. The system gently carried her to the bed. For a moment, Pei Ling felt relieved, thinking the system was actually being respectful and that they should leave immediately. However, the system then reached out and removed her veil. Pei Ling was stunned by how beautiful she was. The system announced that the partner had been acquired and that the formal training would now begin. Pei Ling felt a huge conflict between his common sense and his impulses, but as the system continued the process, his logic completely vanished. He felt like no man could resist such a situation. As the training continued, Pei Ling felt a strange, powerful force flowing through his entire body. Not only did the injuries from his earlier fight heal instantly, but his recent breakthrough in power began to advance even further. But then he saw the Saintess frown slightly in her sleep, and he broke out in a cold sweat. He had no idea what kind of trouble he would be in once she woke up. He was certain his life as he knew it was over. Just then, Zhen Jinshan arrived back at the residence and heard from the head of the family that the traitor was gone and that Li Liwei had personally retrieved the items. Zhen Jinshan was secretly happy, thinking his senior might finally reward him for his help. Little did he know that his respected senior was currently in a very difficult situation because of Pei Ling. However, his mood soured when he noticed that the pills in his cabinet were missing. He asked who had broken in while he was away. A ghost drifted out from the screen in his room, taking the form of a woman, and whispered that it was Pei Ling. She added that the boy was currently at his senior's place, the Fuyun courtyard. Meanwhile, inside the courtyard, the woman on the bed was slowly waking up. She could feel a rush of pure energy flowing into her, which was actually helping her injuries heal quickly. The feeling was so warm and comfortable that she found it hard to fight against. When she finally opened her eyes and saw a stranger there, she immediately realized what was happening. She raised her arm to strike him, but he caught her wrist. Not only did he stop her, but he also managed to keep her pinned down. All the while, the system was still in control of Pei Ling's body, pushing his training to the limit. As she felt the energy growing and the power shifting, she felt deeply embarrassed. While they were caught up in this intense session, Zhen Jinshan arrived at the entrance of the courtyard. Seeing the broken gate, he was shocked and wondered who would dare to trespass there. Inside, Pei Ling looked at the woman and saw the pure anger in her eyes. He felt conflicted. While the boost in power felt amazing, he knew he was going to regret this later. The system, however, didn't care about his feelings. Once the energy reached its peak and the process was complete, Pei Ling finally regained control of his own body. The system sent its usual message about a successful automated session and asked for a 5-star rating. Disclaimer: this is purely a fictional story made for entertainment only. Don't be influenced to hurt anyone's emotions, or don't do squeezing before marriage. If you still go ahead, it's completely your own responsibility. Exhausted, Pei Ling collapsed. He took a deep breath and looked right into Li Liwei's eyes, which looked like she wanted to tear him apart. He knew there was no time to explain and that he needed to leave immediately. But just then he heard footsteps and Zhen Jinshan's voice outside, demanding to know who was trespassing. Pei Ling felt like he couldn't breathe. Outside, Zhen Jinshan was stunned to see that his senior's door was also broken. He assumed Pei Ling was just there to steal more things. He decided he was going to punish the boy on behalf of the family. Suddenly, the bells on the roof began to ring loudly. The sound was so powerful that Zhen Jinshan was thrown back, even coughing up blood. He immediately dropped to his knees, begging his senior for forgiveness. Then, her familiar icy voice came from inside the room, sounding more furious than ever before. Zhen Jinshan didn't waste a second. He turned around and ran away as fast as he could. Pei Ling looked at the woman, feeling incredibly awkward. He started to apologize, but before he could finish, she walked right past him behind a screen to wash up and compose herself. Seeing this, Pei Ling quickly got dressed, planning to make a run for it. However, the system popped up again, asking for a 5-star review if he was satisfied. Without hesitation, Pei Ling gave it a 1-star rating. He thought to himself that if he could actually uninstall the system, he would have kicked it out a long time ago. The system apologized, stating it had failed to provide a satisfactory experience. As an apology, it offered a free nourishing essence pill. Before Pei Ling could even react, the system took over his body again. It reached into Li Liwei's torn clothes on the bed and pulled out a small purse, taking a pill from it. The system then announced that the pill had been delivered and wished him a successful journey. Pei Ling was completely stunned. He couldn't believe the system would make him steal from the Saintess right after everything else that had happened. He felt like he was being forced into being a total scoundrel. He quickly picked up the pill, intending to put it back. Suddenly, he felt a cold chill behind him. He turned around to find Li Liwei standing there. With a freezing look, she asked him exactly what he thought he was doing. To her, it looked like he was being completely shameless. Not only had he forced himself on her, but now he was digging through her personal belongings to steal her medicine. Caught red-handed with a pink accessory on his head while messing with her clothes, Pei Ling realized there was no way to explain his way out of this. He felt incredibly bitter and blamed the dog system, wishing he could leave it 10,000 negative reviews. A moment later, a massive explosion rocked the area, shocking Zhen Jinshan, who was nearby. Luckily, the Saintess did didn't actually harm her future husband, the attack just barely missed him. Pei Ling couldn't understand why she had spared him, not realizing that she had actually just finished removing the curse from his body. Just then, Zhen Jinshan and a relative named Pei Hongnian arrived, hearing the noise. Pei Hongnian was shocked to see Pei Ling there and asked what he was doing. When Zhen Jinshan heard Pei Ling's name, his expression soured immediately. He went straight to Li Li Wei and told her that Pei Ling was a liar who deserved a harsh punishment. Instead of agreeing, she simply slapped him aside, leaving him on the ground. Without saying a word, she pulled a small jade boat from her robes. With a quick gesture, the boat grew until it was a 3-story floating ship. She stepped onto the vessel and told the group that it was time to return to the sect. Pei Ling was relieved, thinking he had finally survived the whole ordeal and could stay behind. However, the ship didn't move. Pei Ling looked up and realized Li Liu was staring directly at him. He had a bad feeling and tried to sneak away, but Zhen Jinshan called him out, telling him to hurry up and get on board. With no other choice, Pei Ling reluctantly stepped onto the ship. The vessel took off, turning into a streak of light as it headed toward the Zhongming sect. Even though it was his first time flying, Pei Ling was too stressed to enjoy the view. He stayed hunched over on the deck, trying to stay out of sight. Inside the cabin, 2 other women were watching him, confused as to why their master would personally help him with the curse from the painting. The drama wasn't over yet, though. Zhen Jinshan approached with Pei Hongnian looking for a fight. With a look of anger, he demanded to know who gave Pei Ling the courage to steal his bone-tempering pills. Just as he was about to attack, he noticed that the marks from the curse were gone. He realized that his senior must have removed them herself. He suddenly thought that she must value the kid quite a bit, and felt glad he hadn't acted too recklessly yet. Seeing that Zhen Jinshan didn't seem interested in making a move, Pei Ling let out a quiet sigh of relief. However, Pei Hongnian, who was standing nearby, suddenly shouted in surprise. He noticed that Pei Ling had already reached the 4th level of his training stage, even though he had only been at the 2nd level just a few days ago. Hearing this, Zhen Jinshan realized something was up. He knew the special pills could usually only be taken once, so he wondered if the boy had somehow managed to train 10 times faster than normal in a single day. He figured this must be why his senior found the kid so valuable. He then pulled out a massive, intimidating cleaver. Pei Ling was terrified, worrying that he was about to be attacked. Pei Hongnian recognized the weapon as the life-loathing blade and wondered what was about to happen. To their surprise, Zhen Jinshan spoke calmly. He mentioned that since the 2 of them helped catch the traitor but didn't get a share of the reward earlier, he would give them a chance to earn something. He explained that the sect believed in being fair. He turned the handle toward them and held the sharp edge with just 2 fingers, promising to use only 20% of his power. He told them that whoever could pull the blade from his grip could keep it. Pei Hongnian was thrilled and stepped up immediately. He grabbed the handle and pulled with everything he had, but the blade wouldn't move an inch. Instead, the dark energy from the weapon actually knocked him to the ground. Zhen Jinshan gave a mocking smile and turned to Pei Ling, telling him it was his turn. Pei Ling waved his hands, trying to decline. He didn't trust that Zhen Jinshan was being kind and felt that his own strength was too low to succeed anyway. But Zhen Jinshan's face darkened, and he accused Pei Ling of looking down on the weapon. Just as the tension was peaking, 2 women in elegant flowing outfits appeared. They were the Saintess's ghostly assistants. Zhen Jinshan looked nervous and immediately showed them respect, asking if the Saintess had any orders. One of the assistants, Wu Lu, walked over to Pei Ling and playfully flicked his chin, commenting on how handsome he was, but her tone changed instantly to a cold warning. She told him to pull the blade quickly, threatening to skin him alive if he disturbed her master. Left with no choice, Pei Ling stepped forward. Zhen Jinshan felt smug, thinking a 4th level student had no chance. However, his expression changed when Pei Ling started pulling, and the blade actually began to slide out from his fingers. Desperate not to lose, Zhen Jinshan secretly broke his promise and increased his strength, causing Pei Ling to fail. As Zhen Jinshan was about to brag about his win, the assistants interrupted. One of them, Zhao Ni, remarked that they already had 1 useless person on the boat and didn't need another. She casually mentioned that the lampshade in their master's room was getting old and suggested skinning Pei Ling to make a new one. Pei Ling was horrified, wondering if the Saintess actually knew how cruel her staff was. Wu Lu then stepped in, suggesting that since Pei Ling was from a remote area, they should give him a fairer chance. She proposed that Zhen Jinshan limit himself to only 15% of his power. Zhao Ni agreed, and Wu Lu smiled sweetly at Pei Ling, telling him he better work hard unless he wanted to end up as furniture. Zhen Jinshan watched them and realized this must be what the Saintess wanted. He knew he was probably going to lose his weapon, but he had to play along. He acted like he didn't care and handed the blade to Pei Ling one more time. As Pei Ling pulled with all his might, the prized blade finally slid free. Zhen Jinshan looked like he was about to burst into tears of frustration, but he forced himself to tell Pei Ling to use the weapon well and never to let its reputation down. Pei Ling quickly thanked him, and Wu Lu added some praise of her own before leading Pei Ling into the cabin to rest. As soon as they stepped inside, the air turned freezing cold. The sound of doors banging and thumping echoed around them, making it clear that this was exactly the kind of eerie place you'd expect from a dark sect. Suddenly, a pair of glowing red eyes appeared from a room behind them, and a wave of chilling energy rushed toward Pei Ling. At the last second, Wu Lu let out a sharp scolding, and the energy slowly pulled back. Pei Ling thanked her again, but but she acted like it was no big deal. Soon, they arrived at his room. However, Wu Lu didn't leave. Instead, she turned to him and asked if she could ask him a question. Pei Ling didn't dare say no. As soon as he agreed, she moved so fast she was practically touching his nose. Her pink eyes stared right into his, and her freezing fingertips brushed against his neck. She asked him why he carried the scent of her master on him. Pei Ling was terrified, his heart racing as he wondered if she knew exactly what had happened between him and the Saintess. She tilted her head, her cold hand caressing his cheek, and whispered that even someone as strong as Zhen Jinshan couldn't resist her master's magical bells. She was curious about what made him so special that he could act as if nothing had happened. Pei Ling felt both shocked and deeply embarrassed. He realized she had likely seen everything, but he knew it was actually the system that had protected him from the magical music. Stammering, he claimed it was probably just his unique physical makeup. He mentioned that even the traitor they captured earlier had commented on how unusually strong his body was. Wu Lu seemed to think about this. She noted that he had a very stable soul and a powerful body, making him a perfect subject to bring back to the sect for research. She casually mentioned that her master might even extract his soul for experiments to see what made him tick. Pei Ling broke into a cold sweat. He realized the terrifying truth. They didn't bring him along because he was special. They brought him along to be a lab rat. Wu Lu leaned in close to his ear and warned him to be careful, saying her master's methods of questioning were impossible to resist. Before he could react, she hit him with a quick strike, knocking him out cold. The last thing Pei Ling saw before everything went black was Wu Lu's sinister smile and the elegant figure of Li Liu walking toward him. Whatever happened next was clearly going to be intense, as the floating ship continued its long journey toward the Heavy Mist sect. Inside the room, Pei Ling was sweating heavily for some reason he couldn't quite explain. Outside, a few disciples were complaining about how slowly the ship was moving. It had been 2 weeks and they still hadn't reached the sect. They had no idea that the owner of the ship had been occupied with Pei Ling the entire time. In that room, time seemed to stand still, and half a month passed before anyone realized it. Meanwhile, Zhen Jinshan told Pei Hongnian to prepare to take Pei Ling to the outer sect. Pei Hongnian was confused and asked why a kid like Pei Ling was qualified for the outer sect, but Zhen Jinshan didn't bother explaining. It was an order from Li Liu, and he wasn't about to question her. When Pei Ling finally woke up, he noticed his inner energy had grown significantly, though his back and waist felt pretty sore. Just then, he heard Pei Hongnian shouting at his door. When Pei Ling slowly opened it, he looked pale and exhausted, like he hadn't slept in weeks. Pei Hongnian told him they were almost at the Heavy Mist sect and that he needed to pack his things immediately. Pei Ling panicked. He shut the door, worrying about how he would survive in such a dangerous place. He was already thinking about how to escape when a purple mist filled the room. Li Liu appeared out of nowhere and tossed a secret manual at his head. She gave him a very simple and terrifying choice: master the technique within 10 days or face the consequences. Then, she vanished. Pei Ling looked at the manual, which was titled the Bloodthirsty Blade Technique. As soon as he opened it, his system notified him that it was recording the new skill. Pei Ling felt a surge of pride, thinking that with his special advantage, he didn't have anything to worry about. For the first time, he was actually happy to have the system around. After half a month of travel, the ship finally arrived. Following Pei Hongnian onto the deck, Pei Ling was amazed by how busy and grand everything looked compared to his hometown. Pei Hongnian explained that they were at the dust-cutting terrace, the place where new disciples leave their old lives behind to become immortals. He then led Pei Ling toward the registration for the outer sect. Pei Ling was nervous about meeting powerful people and thought about suggesting he just start as a basic worker instead. But Pei Hongnian wouldn't hear it, telling him it was an order and asking if he really wanted to go against Zhen Jinshan's wishes. Pei Ling quickly agreed to go along. They soon reached the inheritance hall, where they found a messy-looking old man relaxing with some drinks. The old man seemed annoyed at being disturbed. Suddenly, the hall was filled with floating soul lamps. Before Pei Ling knew what was happening, the old man gestured toward him, and Pei Ling felt his body lock up. A small drop of his essence was pulled from his forehead and merged into one of the lamps. The old man told him that now that his lamp was lit, he was officially a member of the Heavy Mist sect. He handed over a book of rules and told them to leave. Pei Ling was actually happy to see such a thick book of rules. He figured that as long as there were clear guidelines to follow, he could find a way to stay safe and survive. Pei Ling was caught up in his own thoughts and couldn't help but laugh to himself. However, Pei Hongnian quickly corrected him, explaining that once he actually read the handbook, he would realize that the biggest rule of the Heavy Mist sect was that there were no rules at all. This revelation left the main character trembling in fear, especially as he spotted two very intimidating men nearby. Luckily, Pei Hongnian stepped in just in time. He handed Pei Ling a nameplate and a storage bag. When Pei Ling saw that the nameplate was actually made from a piece of bone, he felt a bit sick to his stomach, thinking it really suited a dark sect like this. Pei Hongnian warned him that the nameplate was his most valuable possession and could literally save his life in a crisis. He then pulled a small paper boat from his pocket, which grew in size when he tossed it into the clouds. He jumped on and told Pei Ling to follow him so they could head to his new home. Pei Ling was a bit worried about how sturdy a paper boat could be, but once they took off, it was surprisingly stable. As Pei Ling was admiring the view of the clouds, a green feather drifted past, followed by a massive green bird. Before Pei Ling could even blink, the bird swiped its claw and flipped their boat over. He was terrified and confused as to why why there were dangerous creatures flying around the sect. He reached for his weapon to defend them, but Pei Hongnian stopped him, worried that using a blade would ruin his boat. While they were distracted, the boat crashed into a mountain, sending them both falling. Fortunately, because they were cultivators, they managed to survive the fall without serious injuries. Pei Hongnian ended up hanging from a tree, still complaining about his ruined boat. Suddenly, they heard someone nearby shout that they had found them. Two aggressive-looking people approached, and Pei Ling realized they must have been the ones who sent the bird after them. He was ready to stand his ground, but he was shocked to see Pei Hongnian immediately turn into a total suck-up. He began shamelessly flattering a woman in green, but she just slapped him away. Pei Ling was stunned to see that Pei Hongnian wasn't even mad. Instead, he stayed on the ground, constantly apologizing to her. Pei Ling couldn't believe his senior was such a bootlicker. When the woman started to scold him again, Pei Ling couldn't just stand there and watch. He stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. Even though she was at the same power level as him, she couldn't break free. She immediately acted upset and asked Pei Hongnian why he was letting his junior bully her. Pei Hongnian jumped up and started lecturing Pei Ling, telling him to let her go. Pei Ling had no choice but to step aside and watch his senior go right back to being a sycophant. Eventually, Pei Hongnian told Pei Ling to just head to the administrative hall and find a place to live on his own while he followed the woman. Watching him walk away, Pei Ling just shook his head. He realized his senior was a lost cause. He said goodbye and headed to the administrative hall by himself to pick out a place to stay. Faced with the senior disciple in charge of housing, Pei Ling felt completely speechless. He never imagined that after crossing over to another world, he would still have to deal with the headache of picking a room. Before the senior could even finish his explanation, Pei Ling interrupted with a bright smile, asking if the senior would be willing to lend him some spirit stones, promising to pay them back. The senior disciple cut him off coldly and told him to just head west for 100 miles. Meanwhile, back on the floating ship, Zhen Jinshan was giving Li Liyue an update on Pei Ling. He was dying to know why she was paying so much attention to this kid. Li Liyue calmly set down her tea and asked if she had heard correctly that he was eager to go work in the dangerous mining ranges. Realizing he had overstepped, Zhen Jinshan apologized and hurried out of the room. Once outside, he started to wonder if his senior was using him to test the boy's potential. Inside, Li Liyue summoned her ghostly assistant, Wu Lu, and told her to keep a close watch on Pei Ling. After a very long walk, Pei Ling finally reached his new home. He was shocked to find that the place was actually quite luxurious, and he felt a bit guilty for misjudging the housing disciple. Walking into the courtyard, he saw that 3 of the doors were sealed with magical tags, meaning he had 3 roommates who were currently out. With some free time on his hands, he sat down with the sex rulebook and his new blade, determined to study the laws. To him, these rules were the key to staying alive. He learned that the Heavy Mist sect was an ancient and powerful organization divided into different peaks. Each area had its own management. The Treasury Hall sold skills, the Treasure Hall sold gear, and the Enforcer Hall handled the punishments. However, as he read further, he was stunned to find that the rules were essentially just a price list. The summary of the entire handbook was simple. Everything can be settled with money. If disciples fought, they paid a fine. If you attacked someone, you paid spirit stones. Even if you caused a permanent injury or ended someone's life to take their treasure, the sect would look the other way as long as you could pay the fine. Basically, if you were rich, you could do whatever you wanted. Pei Ling had hoped that following the rules would keep him safe, but he quickly realized that wouldn't be the case. Suddenly, he heard a noise outside, and his front door was kicked open by 3 men. One of them frowned and asked who he was. Pei Ling introduced himself politely, explaining he was a new student at the 4th level of his training. The 3 men looked at each other, communicating silently. They realized it wasn't the usual time for new students to arrive, so they figured he might have some special connections and decided to be cautious. One of them, named Li Si, introduced himself and his friends, Zhou Yi and Miao Chen. He told Pei Ling that since they were roommates now, they would look after him. Pei Ling was genuinely touched, thinking he had finally found some decent people in this dark place. Then, the 3 of them began asking him exactly how he had managed to get into the outer sect. Seeing that his new roommate seemed pretty calm, Pei Ling felt a bit of relief. He explained that his arrival had been arranged by an inner sect leader named Zhen Jinshan. However, Miao Chen didn't hold back, calling Zhen Jinshan a waste and claiming he only got his position because he was a distant relative of Li Liyue. Pei Ling was shocked to hear that Zhen Jinshan's reputation was so bad. Li Si tried to smooth things over, telling Pei Ling not to be offended since Miao Chen had some personal history with the leader. Then, Li Si started digging for more information about Pei Ling's connection to Li Liyue. Not wanting to cause trouble by using her name, Pei Ling quickly clarified that he was just lucky to get a promotion from Zhen Jinshan and that it had nothing to do with the Saintess. As soon as he said that, Li Si's expression changed. He pointed at the life-loathing blade and asked if it was the same famous weapon Zhen Jinshan used to win all his fights in the outer sect. Pei Ling tried to play it down, saying it was just an ordinary knife. knife, but Li Si wasn't buying it. Zhou Yi cut straight to the chase and told Pei Ling to name his price because he wanted that blade. Pei Ling gave a polite smile and declined, saying it wouldn't be right to sell a gift from a senior. Unfortunately, the three of them didn't care about Zhen Jinshin's influence and clearly didn't respect Pei Ling. Seeing that he wouldn't cooperate, Zhou Yi suddenly punched him. The force sent Pei Ling flying into the wall, kicking up a cloud of dust. When the air cleared, Pei Ling stood up, unharmed but realizing that this wasn't going to end peacefully. He gripped his blade with both hands and told them that if they wanted the weapon, they'd have to prove they were strong enough to take it. Miao Chen immediately used a magical technique to fire 2 beams of energy at him. Pei Ling couldn't move fast enough and had to block with the blade. Even though he neutralized the attack, the impact made the heavy knife vibrate violently in his hands. Before he could recover, Zhou Yi rushed in for another punch. Pei Ling dodged, realizing they weren't holding anything back. Feeling enraged, he swung the blade fiercely to keep them at bay. Li Si, who had been watching from the side, noticed that Pei Ling didn't actually know any professional swordsmanship. He told his friends to just knock the blade away and recited a spell. 2 translucent ghosts appeared and charged at Pei Ling. He tried to slash at them, but to his surprise, they passed right through his body. It felt like a heavy hammer had struck his mind, making him dizzy and weak. However, he managed to pull himself together and swung the blade to drive the spirits off. Li Si was impressed by how quickly he recovered, wondering how his soul could be so stable. While Pei Ling was distracted by the ghosts, Zhou Yi saw an opening and landed a heavy blow on his chest. Pei Ling coughed up blood, and the blade slipped from his grip. Despite the pain, he managed to grab Zhou Yi by the collar and threw him into Li Si. Miao Chen was furious to see his friends on the ground and reminded Pei Ling that he was at a higher power level. He fired more energy beams, and this time, without his blade to block, Pei Ling took the hits directly. Seeing Pei Ling bleeding, Miao Chen rushed to grab the life-loathing blade, but just as he reached for it, Pei Ling stepped firmly on his arm. Pei Ling sneered, asking him if he really thought he could just take the knife. He then sent Miao Chen flying with a knee strike. Realizing how tough he was, all 3 roommates attacked at once. Pei Ling managed to pick up his blade and strike back, forcing them all to retreat, but he could feel that he was already reaching his limit. Seeing that Pei Ling had managed to survive his energy attacks and still had the strength to fight, Miao Chen started thinking about making a run for it. He took a deep breath and shouted that they wouldn't let Pei Ling off the hook for this. Pei Ling responded coldly, telling them that he would just finish all 3 of them instead. His voice wasn't loud, but the pure aggression in his tone terrified the roommates, making them wonder if they were actually going to lose their lives right then and there. However, a second later, Pei Ling suddenly turned and sprinted toward the gate with incredible speed, disappearing into the distance. After about 30 minutes of running, he stopped in a thick forest. Breathing heavily, he felt a wave of relief, realizing he had almost forgotten the sex laws. Getting rid of a fellow member would cost him 10,000 spirit stones in fines, money he definitely didn't have. Reflecting on the fight, he realized his lack of formal training was a major weakness. He knew he had to master the bloodthirsty demon blade technique Li Liyue had given him immediately. He opened his system and selected the skill to start training, but a notification popped up. It warned him that his injuries were too severe and that training now would cause permanent damage. He needed to take a recovery pill first. Pei Ling got anxious, worried the system was about to force him to steal from another powerful leader, but to his relief, the system simply reached into his own pocket and found the recovery pills Li Liyu had given him earlier. After he swallowed one, he felt a warm energy rising from his core. As the system guided the energy through his body, his injuries began to heal rapidly. But just as he was enjoying the feeling, the system sent another alert. It stated that the technique required the essence of other cultivators to continue. It then announced it would provide 3 suitable targets for free. Pei Ling's eyes went wide. He tried to cancel the command, but the system ignored him. It turned his body around and started heading right back toward his residence where the 3 roommates were. Meanwhile, back at the house, the 3 men were having a meeting. They were convinced Pei Ling had some sort of secret and planned to hunt him down the next day to expose him. Suddenly, Pei Ling kicked the door open and marched back in. The 3 were shocked to see him. Li Si started to yell at him, but before he could finish, Pei Ling's blade moved in a flash, ending the argument instantly. Without pausing, the system forced him to use the fallen opponent's energy to power his training. Zhou Yi and Miao Chen were horrified and enraged by the sight. Zhou Yi jumped into the air to land a heavy punch, but the system immediately paused the session, noting an external attack and asking for its usual 5-star rating. Now back in control of his own body, Pei Ling dodged the strike. He knew there was no going back now. It was him or them. With his eyes full of determination, he thrust his blade forward, and Zhou Yi collapsed as his strength failed him. Furious, Miao Chen unleashed 3 consecutive sword energy blasts. Knowing how dangerous this move was, Pei Ling didn't dare hold back and immediately activated the bloodthirsty demon blade technique. With a single powerful swing, he managed to disperse the incoming energy. Realizing his standard attacks weren't working, Miao Chen went all out, using both hands to form complex seals to trigger the full power of a magical sword talisman he was holding. Sensing the overwhelming energy radiating from the talisman, Pei Ling felt a surge of fear. He threw the life-loathing blade with all his might, aiming straight at Miao Chen. However, Miao Chen just smirked, mocking him for being too slow. A massive surge of spiritual energy gathered in his arm and surged toward Pei Ling, putting him in immediate life-threatening danger. A massive explosion followed, shattering the entire courtyard and sending a thick cloud of dust into the air. When the smoke finally cleared, Pei Ling was nowhere to be seen. Miao Chen wiped some blood from his mouth, feeling confident that the powerful talisman from his older brother had completely obliterated his opponent, but his relief turned to pure terror when a voice spoke from directly behind him, asking if he had underestimated him. Miao Chen collapsed to the ground, begging for his life and mentioning his brother's status as an inner disciple. Pei Ling showed no mercy, delivering a final decisive strike. Surveying the ruined courtyard, Pei Ling sighed, glad the struggle was finally over. However, when the system popped up again asking for a 5-star rating, he lost his temper. He realized that according to the sect rules, taking out 3 outer disciples could cost him up to 90,000 spirit stones in fines. He hoped they had enough treasures on them to cover the debt. He searched their belongings but only found some basic medicine and 3 storage pouches. To his frustration, the pouches were magically sealed and he couldn't open them yet. Since the battle was done, he decided to use what was left of their energy for his training. He triggered the one-click cultivation again, but the system noted a lack of energy and claimed it would provide 2 more cultivators for free. Pei Ling was confused until he heard 2 cries of pain nearby. It turned out Zhou Yi and Miao Chen had been faking their deaths, and his blade was now actively draining their remaining life force. He couldn't help but marvel at how sneaky people in this sect could be. With the energy requirement met, the system took over his body to continue the training right there at the scene. Each swing of the blade sent shockwaves through the courtyard, making a complete mess of the area. He leaped out of the courtyard, his movements becoming a blur as the wind howled with every strike. Even though the situation was a mess, Pei Ling couldn't help but feel overjoyed at the raw power of the blood slaughter blade technique. Wu Lu, the ghostly assistant who had been watching from the shadows, was stunned. She hadn't expected the boy to improve so fast. She realized there was definitely something magnetic and unusual about him. Back in his own mind, the system notified Pei Ling that he had officially mastered the blood slaughter blade technique. For once, Pei Ling was actually happy with the system. He decided he would reluctantly give it a 3-star rating this time, but as he snapped back to reality and looked at the mess in front of him, he remembered the looming 90,000 spirit stone fine. He knew he had to grab his gear and get out of there. However, as he stared out at the endless jagged mountain ranges, he realized he was completely lost. There was no clear path out of the sect. Feeling desperate, he buried his 3 roommates, hoping it would buy him some time before the Enforcer Hall investigators showed up. With no other options, he decided to seek help from the only person he knew, his bootlicking senior, Pei Hongnian. But when he pushed open the courtyard door, he witnessed something truly embarrassing. Pei Hongnian was passionately kissing a portrait of the woman he was obsessed with, Sun Yinan. Pei Ling was cringing hard, thinking he had picked the absolute worst time to visit. But since his life was on the line, he pretended he hadn't seen a thing and greeted his senior warmly. To his surprise, Pei Hongnian looked terrified and told him to stay back, worried that Sun Yinan would be jealous if she saw them together. Pei Ling played along, apologizing for potentially upsetting his sister-in-law. Hearing that term made Pei Hongnian's face turn bright red with joy. Seizing the moment, Pei Ling asked how to leave the sect, claiming he wanted to go find a special gift to apologize to her. Moved to tears by the gesture, Pei Hongnian explained the geography. He told him that Yin Peak was too far to travel on foot. He would need to rent a Yin Corpse Cloud for 10 spirit stones. When Pei Ling asked to borrow the 10 stones, Pei Hongnian's attitude flipped instantly. He explained he had given every single stone he owned to Sun Yinan and had nothing left. He told Pei Ling to go to the miscellaneous tasks department to earn the money himself and warned him not to come back. Pei Ling didn't even want to argue with him. He headed straight to the tasks department, hoping to find a quick way out. He inserted his bone nameplate into the slot and looked at the list of jobs. He scratched his head at the bizarre options. Mail delivery, 1 month for 3 spirit stones. Beast care, 1 month rewarded only with animal droppings. Ghost face grass hunting, 5 spirit stones. At this rate, he realized he wouldn't save up for his fines in 10 lifetimes. Finally, he saw a mission that paid 800 spirit stones, but it required a level 6 cultivation, and he was only at level 4. Then, he had an idea. He didn't actually care about the pay. If he could just join a team for a mission outside the walls, he could sneak away and escape the sect forever. But finding a team was harder than he expected. The first group rejected him for being under level 6. The second group just looked down on his strength. The third group told him straight up that joining a mission at his level would be a suicide mission. Just when Pei Ling was starting to feel hopeless, a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. A very large woman told him that even though his level was low, she wouldn't look down on him. Terrified, Pei Ling scrambled away, joking that she'd probably look even better once she slimmed down and begged her to spare him for now. Meanwhile, in a corner of the department, one of Sun Yinan's followers was busy gossiping. He told her that Pei Ling was looking for a team and mocked him for thinking a level 4 student could handle sect missions. Sun Yinan smiled coldly, saying that since Pei Ling had dared to annoy her, she would give him a helping hand today. Pei Ling was feeling the pressure. Having just arrived in this world, he was already stuck with a massive debt of 90,000 spirit stones, making life in the Heavy Mist sect unbearable. He just wanted to join a group, get outside the walls, and disappear. But his low level made him a target for ridicule and almost cost him his innocence with the commander's sister. Just as he was stuck, he overheard a group nearby looking for teammates. Specifically, they only wanted newcomers at levels 3 and 4. Pei Ling's spirits lifted instantly. This was exactly what he needed. He stepped forward quickly and introduced himself to the leader, confirming he was at the 4th level. The leader asked if he needed time to prepare, but Pei Ling insisted on leaving immediately. He didn't want to stay in that hellish sect for even one more second. He had no idea that he was walking right into a trap. Earlier, Sun Yinan had approached this leader, a man named Chen. She told him that Pei Ling's potential made him a perfect blood sacrifice for Chen's dark rituals. Chen had hesitated at first, worried about Pei Ling's connection to Zhen Jinshan, but Sun Yinan convinced him that Zhen Jinshan didn't actually care about the boy. If he did, why would he let him wander around looking for a team alone? Hearing this, Chen's worries vanished. He looked at the happy, unsuspecting Pei Ling with a sinister smile, thinking he finally had what he needed to upgrade his magical soul summoning banner. Soon, the group headed out. Sitting on a yin corpse cloud, Pei Ling felt great. It was much smoother and faster than the flimsy paper boat he had used before. As they traveled, Chen Huan patted him on the back and introduced the rest of the crew. He identified himself as a level 6 cultivator and introduced his sister Chen Mei, who was at level 4. The other three, Wang Xian, Zhang Zhongqin, and Xiao Tasha, were all at level 5. Pei Ling quickly saluted the group, introducing himself and confirming he was at the 4th level of the Foundation Establishment realm. Chen Huan explained that the primary goal of the mission was to provide real-world training for his sister Chen Mei, who was also at the 4th level. Pei Ling immediately acted loyal, promising Chen Huan that he would do everything in his power to protect her. In reality, he was already plotting his exit. He had no intention of babysitting anyone's sister. He just wanted to get far away from the sect. He figured that once they were out in the open, the world would be his to explore. However, something felt a bit off. He looked at the scenery passing by and casually asked what else their bone tokens were used for besides identification. The answer he got made his heart sink. He learned that outside the sect, the token was the only proof of his identity, a way to call for help, and most importantly, a GPS-like device for tracking his location in an emergency. Pei Ling was shocked to realize the useless bone was actually a tracking device. He realized he'd have to get rid of it the moment he made his break. He scratched his head and asked a follow-up, what would happen if someone who owed the sect money decided to toss their token and just disappear? One of the seniors, Xiao, smiled and shared a chilling story. She told him about a disciple who owed only 100 spirit stones and tried to run away during a mission. The sect didn't just let it go. They sent 3 powerful hunters to chase him for 20 years. In the end, they didn't just find him, they took out his entire family. Was that persistent over 100 stones? He couldn't imagine what they'd do for his 90,000 stone debt. He realized his plan to run away was basically a death sentence. He'd have to stay and actually work to pay off the debt. He asked about the mission details and learned they were hunting a 6th level awakened beast, which had the strength of a level 6 cultivator. His specific job was to keep Chen Mai safe. When he eagerly asked how much he'd get paid, Chen Huan told him he could earn 20 spirit stones if he did a good job. Pei Ling was stunned. He was thinking about his 90,000 stone debt and realized 20 stones wouldn't even make a dent. Chen Huan, however, misread his expression, thinking the newcomer was just overwhelmed by how much money 20 stones was. He felt a bit of contempt for what he saw as Pei Ling's small-town perspective. Chen Mei mentioned that while 20 stones was a decent start, the real money was in specialized skills like crafting tools, making medicine, or creating talismans. She noted that Pei Hongnian actually had a huge talent for talismans and was almost chosen for special training before Sun Yinan's drama ruined his chances. Pei Ling was surprised and asked how he had managed to impress the instructors. Apparently, Pei Hongnian was considered a prodigy because he successfully drew his very first talisman after only 2 years of practice. When Pei Ling heard that a prodigy takes 2 full years to show their talent, he felt his heart sink. With only 3 months to pay off his massive debt, those timelines weren't going to work for him. Just then, Zhang Zhongqin, who had been quiet the whole time, suggested a friendly sparring session. Pei Ling was curious about the team's actual power, so he agreed. He squared his shoulders and threw a straightforward punch at Zhang. Seeing how simple and unrefined the move looked, Zhang smiled and decided to take the hit head-on without moving. However, a second later, a massive force slammed into him. He was nearly humiliated and had to scramble back quickly to stay on his feet. Realizing Pei Ling was much stronger than he looked, Zhang stopped holding back and attacked with everything he had. Since he couldn't dodge in such a tight space, Pei Ling had to endure the blows. After several exchanges, he began to feel the pressure of fighting someone at the 5th level and started to lose ground. Chen Huan stepped in to stop the fight before it went too far. Pei Ling bowed politely and thanked Zhang for the lesson. During the conversation that followed, Huang Xian asked why Pei Ling hadn't used the large blade he was carrying. Pei Ling just smiled and explained that since Zhang was fighting bare-handed, it wouldn't have been fair to draw a weapon. weapon. In his head, though, he was determined not to show his cards. He didn't want anyone else targeting the life-loathing blade. As the journey continued in silence, Chen Huan was secretly thrilled. He watched Pei Ling, who seemed totally unaware of any danger, and marveled at how strong the boy's physical body was. He thought to himself that Pei Ling was the perfect final ingredient he needed to finish his Dark Soul banner. He even whispered a promise to the others that this mission might be their ticket into the inner sect. Tasha immediately pledged her full support to help Chen Huan reach that goal. Pei Ling noticed that everyone suddenly seemed to be in a great mood, though he couldn't figure out why. Chen Mei approached him with a concerned look and asked if he was hurt from the sparring, offering him a few chi blood pills. Pei Ling was happy to take them, thinking he'd never turn down a chance to get free supplies. With everyone seemingly satisfied, the team traveled for a few more days until they reached their destination, Screw Mountain City. Since the city lord was busy with urgent matters, the group was greeted by the head steward of the mansion to begin their mission. As they entered the mansion, Pei Ling noticed that the air felt incredibly fresh and full of energy. Chen Mei laughed and explained that the city lord was an expert in magical formations and had installed a system to draw spiritual energy into the building. Chen Huan quickly warned Pei Ling that since the city lord was a senior cultivator, he had to be on his best behavior when they met. Pei Ling nodded repeatedly, promising to be respectful. The city lord, Duan Muyan, soon arrived to greet them. He looked to be in his 40s, with a dignified look and a short, well-groomed beard. He had a very sharp, capable energy about him that commanded attention. The group stood up immediately to show their respect. After some small talk, Chen Huan explained their two goals, dealing with a flower creature outside the city and hunting a purple-eyed ferret in the nearby mountains. Unexpectedly, the city lord's expression turned serious. He told them that while they were likely prepared for those tasks, a new danger had appeared. A powerful human-faced spider had moved into the mountains to lay its eggs, right near where the ferret lived. Pei Ling and Chen Huan were both stunned, but for very different reasons. Chen Huan was worried that this new monster would ruin his secret plans for the sacrifice, while Pei Ling was terrified that his 20 spirit stone reward was about to disappear. Seeing them hesitate, the city lord offered a bit of hope. He had already mapped out where the spider was active and suggested that if they were extremely careful and avoided that specific area, they could still finish their mission. Chen Huan felt a wave of relief as he took the map. He was determined to avoid the spider so he could finally complete his soul banner. Later that night, back in his guest room, Pei Ling was doing some mental math. He realized that doing basic missions would never get him the 90,000 spirit stones he needed. He even started wondering if he'd eventually be forced to sell his prized blade. Just as he was lost in thought, a bone-chilling cold began to fill the room. Pei Ling knew something was wrong and threw open his door, only to find the courtyard thick with the suffocating stench of decay and echoing with eerie moans. The situation was clearly dangerous, and he shouted for his teammates as a zombie suddenly lunged at him. He barely managed to block the attack with his blade, his mind spinning. How could the guest quarters of the city lord's own mansion turn into such a nightmare? Before he could catch his breath, another creature attacked from behind. In that moment of panic, a thought flashed through his mind. Could this be her? He desperately yelled out that he had already mastered the blood-devouring blade technique and begged Wu Lu to show herself. With the massive debt hanging over his head, he had completely lost track of the 10-day deadline Li Liyue had given him. As soon as he spoke, a low hum vibrated through the darkness. The shadows around him seemed to turn into thousands of tiny swimming fish that scattered into the night. Simultaneously, the air turned freezing, and he felt a cold, soft body press against his back. Two pale arms reached over his shoulders and wrapped slowly around his neck. Wu Lu's voice whispered tenderly in his ear, teasing him for making her chase him all this way. After their intense 2-week training session on the ship, Pei Ling had learned that being close to a saintess wasn't exactly a luxury. It was exhausting. He quickly explained that he was only out here on missions to earn enough spirit stones to pay his debts. Wu Lu sounded amused as she asked if he was referring to the fines for taking out Miao Chen and the others. Pei Ling was stunned that she had been watching him so closely. He tried to act casual, complimenting her on her incredible tracking skills. Wu Lu laughed, realizing he had used his roommates as practice materials for his dark skills. She noted that even with help, the blood-devouring blade technique was usually impossible to learn in just 10 days. Her tone suddenly turned icy as she gripped his throat, demanding to know what secret he was hiding. Pei Ling felt paralyzed, as if he were trapped in a block of ice. Wu Lu's sharp fingernail traced across his chest, and he felt certain she was about to cut him open. Just as he thought his life was over, several glowing chains appeared out of nowhere and slammed into Wu Lu, pinning her down. Her face twisted in pain as she begged her master for mercy, promising not to touch him. As soon as she apologized, the chains vanished. Wu Lu's attitude flipped instantly, and she started acting sweet toward Pei Ling again. However, she whispered a warning that he should try to annoy her master. That way, she'd finally be allowed to finish him off. Pei Ling was at a loss for words. It seemed even the ghosts in this sect were completely unstable. Wu Lu tried to lecture him on the dangers of the dark techniques he was using, but Pei Ling didn't really care. He had the system to handle the risks for him. His only real concern was finding a way to get his hands on those 90,000 spirit stones. Pei Ling looked at Wu Lu with hope in his eyes and grabbed her hand. hand, asking if she knew of any way to get 90,000 spirit stones quickly. Wu Liu gave him a look of pure disbelief. She told him that with a physique as impressive as his, he could just ask her master for the money directly, though she teased him about wanting to live off a soft meal provided by a woman. When Pei Ling hesitated to take that route, Wu Liu waved her hand dismissively and told him he'd have to figure it out himself. Before vanishing, she tossed him a new manual for a blood escape technique. She gave him another terrifying ultimatum: master it within 7 days or face certain doom. Pei Ling sighed with relief once she was gone, realizing that if even a ghost servant was this much trouble, Li Liu herself must be a nightmare. He knew he had no choice but to start practicing. The next morning, Pei Ling was still stressing over his massive debt when he heard a knock. It was Chen Mei, telling him that her brother and the others needed extra time to prepare before leaving the city, so they would be resting for the day. She asked if he had any plans. Feeling a bit flustered by her friendliness, he told her he was tired from the trip and planned to just stay in his room. Chen Mei seemed unusually happy to hear this and hurried off to find her brother. Pei Ling scratched his head, wondering why his staying in the room was such great news. He felt like something was definitely off, but he decided to take the opportunity to sneak out to the local market to see if he could find a way to make some quick cash. While he was wandering, an old man approached him, trying to sell him a secret ancestral technique. Pei Ling wasn't falling for it, and when the man became too pushy, he simply pulled out his bone token from the heavy mist sect. The old man's eyes went wide, and he immediately apologized and scurried away. Pei Ling was surprised that the reputation of his underworld sect actually had some practical benefits. Suddenly, Pei Ling's expression shifted. He spotted Chen Mei and Zhang Zhongqin in the market when they were supposed to be resting. He followed them cautiously, unaware that the rest of the team, led by their formation expert Xiao Tasha, was already out in the wilderness setting up a dark ritual. They had found a spot thick with yin energy, the perfect place for a soul devourer formation. The team realized they were short on the magical paper needed for the talismans. Chen Mei had volunteered to go back to the city with Zhang to buy supplies. When another teammate asked why she wasn't back at the mansion watching Pei Ling, she bragged that she had secretly marked him with a special fragrance. She was confident their tracking bees would be able to find him no matter where he tried to hide. Pei Ling, listening from the shadows, was completely baffled. He overheard them talking about the expensive materials and the complex formation they were building. He couldn't understand why they were going through so much trouble and effort just to catch a single ferret. Right at that moment, a street swindler popped up out of nowhere. He told Pei Ling that he had a sharp eye for quality and offered him a treasure that could hide his spiritual energy on the cheap. Startled, Pei Ling grabbed the cloth and took off running. He tossed a bottle of medicine to the old man to settle the debt as he went, but the commotion caught Zhang Zhongqin's eye. Zhang mentioned that he thought he'd just seen Pei Ling and told Chen Mei to release her tracking bees immediately. Pei Ling ducked into a dark alley, worrying that if he were caught out here after saying he'd be resting, it would be impossible to explain. But before he could get away, a voice from behind questioned him, asking if it was really him and why he wasn't at home resting as he'd claimed. Pei Ling waved his hands frantically, trying to say it was all a big misunderstanding. Zhang Zhongqin didn't buy it. He stepped forward and grabbed Pei Ling's shoulder, asking why he'd run away if it were just a misunderstanding. He accused him of potentially overhearing something he wasn't supposed to know. Pei Ling awkwardly made up a story about not being able to sleep and wanting to take a walk without bothering anyone. Zhang signaled Chen Mei, whispering that the kid was acting suspicious and they couldn't just let him go, but Chen Mei disagreed, reminding him that their dark ritual was set for the next day. She suggested they just take him back and keep a very close eye on him. She then grabbed Pei Ling's arm and gave him a seductive look, teasing him for being reckless in a strange city. Pei Ling was amazed at how fast she could flip her personality. Zhang joined in, acting like a protective teammate and saying they should always look out for one another. Pei Ling apologized awkwardly, while Chen Mei gave him a playful warning not to do it again. As they walked him back, Pei Ling was confused. He asked why they weren't buying the materials for the formation anymore. Zhang just smirked and said the others would handle the supplies, but getting Pei Ling back to his room was the priority. As night fell, Pei Ling lay in bed feeling more uneasy by the second. It made no sense that they'd abandon their shopping trip just to escort him back. Plus, they were being way too friendly. A terrifying thought crossed his mind. What if the target of their mission wasn't a beast at all, but actually him? Just as he was spiraling into suspicion, a sudden noise outside jolted him awake. It turned out that Chen Huan and the rest of the team had finished setting up their trap and were finally back. Pei Ling tried to eavesdrop on their conversation, but Chen Huan spotted him immediately and told him to get some rest. Once Pei Ling was out of earshot, Chen Huan asked for an update, and Zhang Zhongqin told him all about Pei Ling sneaking out during the day. Chen Huan didn't seem worried at all. He confidently told the group that they would just take turns watching him through the night so he couldn't run. He planned to lead Pei Ling into a powerful illusion trap created by Xiao Tasha the next day. Chen Huan mentioned that he knew just how effective the trap was because he once got stuck in it for 3 days himself. He was certain that once Pei Ling stepped inside, no amount of skill would save him. The next morning, Chen Huan led the group deep into the forests of Screw Mountain. Seeing himself surrounded by the entire team, Pei Ling was now certain that he was the actual target of this trip, even if he still didn't understand why. He gave a bitter smile and asked if they were still looking for that flower demon. Chen Huan just gave him a cold, indifferent look and told him to keep moving. Chen Mei tried to act nice again, telling telling him not to worry because they were almost there. Pei Ling did some quick math on their power levels and realized he couldn't win a direct fight. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the trees, and several monsters attacked from all sides. The group jumped into action. Pei Ling was thrilled, thinking this chaos was his perfect chance to disappear. However, before he could even make a move, the head of one of the monsters flew past him. He looked around and saw that the fight was already over. Chen Huan stared at him with a dark expression and pointed out that Pei Ling was walking in the wrong direction. Pei Ling played dumb, awkwardly explaining that it was his first time seeing such monsters and he had just panicked and run the wrong way. In his head, he was frustrated that the monsters had been so weak. Chen Mei, sensing he wasn't being honest, grabbed his arm and insisted on holding onto him tightly so they wouldn't get separated again. Pei Ling sighed, realizing he couldn't rely on the local wildlife to help him escape. He knew the ghost woman could save him, but he figured she was probably hoping he'd get finished off. Just then, the team stopped. Chen Huan and Xiao Tasha sent a secret message to the others, telling them to lure Pei Ling into the trap while they went ahead to finalize the main ritual site. Pei Ling was happy to see them go. With the two strongest members away, he felt this was his best shot. He asked where they were going, and Chen Mei lied, saying they were just getting ready to deal with the ferret. They walked for another 15 minutes until Pei Ling whispered to himself that the leaders should be far enough away by now. Before Chen Mei could even blink, Pei Ling dropped the act. He grabbed her by the neck and slammed her to the ground, telling her to stop pretending. Wang Xian and Zhang Zhongqin spun around in total shock, calling him a little beast and demanding to know what he thought he was doing. Pei Ling didn't waste any more time and drew the life-loathing blade. When they asked what he was doing, he told them they knew the answer perfectly well. He launched a powerful wave of energy from his blade that caught them completely off guard, shattering their weapons instantly. Wang Xian and Zhang Zhongqin were stunned by the raw power of the strike. They recognized the weapon and asked if he was actually one of Zhen Jinshan's followers. Pei Ling didn't bother answering and charged straight at them. Realizing they couldn't win a direct fight, the two sent secret messages to each other, agreeing that they had to lure him into the trap immediately. Zhang Zhongqin quickly used a technique to make massive rock walls rise from the ground to block Pei Ling's path. Pei Ling's blade was incredibly sharp, and he smashed through the stone walls in seconds. But when the dust cleared, the two men had disappeared. Suddenly, Huang Xian lunged from the shadows with a magical talisman. Pei Ling spun around and swung his blade, forcing Huang Xian back. But it was too late. The talisman had already been triggered. Golden chains materialized out of thin air and wrapped tightly around Pei Ling, pinning his arms to his sides. While he was stuck, Zhang Zhongqin reappeared and landed a heavy blow that sent Pei Ling flying deep into the nearby woods. When he managed to stand back up, Pei Ling sighed, realizing that taking on two level 5 opponents at once was tougher than he'd thought. He found it weird that they weren't chasing him, but he figured it was the perfect time to get away. However, after walking for a long time, he was shocked to find himself right back where he started. In front of him sat a strange glowing compass. Looking at the dark runes carved into the ground, he realized he was trapped in a magical loop. He tried sprinting in different directions, but no matter which way he went, he always ended up back at the compass. He slumped to the ground, feeling hopeless about being stuck in such a cursed place. Then, a brilliant idea hit him. He called out for the system, telling it he wanted to practice the vampire vanishing technique. The system gave its usual warning about him losing control of his body and started the process. Immediately, ripples of blood-red energy began to flow out from under his feet. As the training progressed, the system noted that the technique required blood energy to continue. It then announced it would provide several high-quality bloodstones for free. Pei Ling was secretly thrilled. He knew there were no bloodstones in this empty forest, which meant the system would be forced to find a way out of the trap to get them. To his surprise, the system led Pei Ling directly toward the face of a massive mountain. Pei Ling panicked, shouting that he had asked for a way out, not a way to end his life. But instead of a crash, he passed straight through the rock. It was all just a clever illusion. Pei Ling was thrilled to be free and decided to reward the system with a 4-star rating for its help. Meanwhile, Chen Huan and Xiao Tasha finished setting up their dark ritual site. When they got back to the group, they found everyone battered and bruised. Huang Xian looked miserable as he explained that they had been tricked and that Pei Ling actually had Zhen Jinshan's famous blade. Zhang Zhongqin couldn't hide his fear, suggesting that maybe they shouldn't mess with someone who had such a powerful connection. Chen Huan stayed completely calm. He told them not to worry because dead men can't talk. He was certain Pei Ling would never make it out of the illusion alive. He announced that in another 30 minutes, the ritual would be finished, and he would finally master his soul summoning banner. The scene shifted back to Pei Ling, who was still under the system's control. He found himself in a dark, creepy cave filled with thousands of spider eggs. He was speechless, wondering if he had accidentally stumbled into the human-faced spider's nest. The system didn't care about the danger. It started slashing the eggs to collect the blood energy needed for his training. His movements became incredibly fast as the blood energy gathered around him like a thin, red cloak. The vampire vanishing technique was a success. The system gave its usual sign-off, asking for a 5-star rating. Just as Pei Ling Ling was celebrating his new skill, a loud rumble echoed from the back of the cave. A massive spider with glowing red eyes was staring him down, absolutely furious. The monster let out a piercing scream and lunged, but thanks to his new technique, Pei Ling was just barely able to dodge. Because the skill came from Li Liu and was perfected by the system, he was able to move at incredible speeds, quickly putting distance between himself and the beast. The spider tried to catch him with its webs, but it could only watch in rage as Pei Ling turned into a tiny speck in the distance. Even though he had made it out of the cave, the spider refused to give up the chase. As he sprinted through a nearby canyon, Pei Ling suddenly had a plan. A few miles away, at the ritual site, the air was heavy with the smell of blood and cinnabar as Chen Huan's soul-summoning banner stood ready in the center of a complex magical array. The banner was a chilling sight, holding a dozen trapped spirits whose faces were twisted in misery. Chen Huan couldn't hide his smug grin as he announced that the ritual site was ready. He signaled Xiao Tasha to begin, and with her command, the dark energy of the formation officially roared to life. Thunder rumbled across the sky as a sinister aura filled the air, but just as Chen Huan was dreaming of his perfected weapon, the entire formation suddenly ground to a halt. Xiao Tasha panicked, realizing the subarray was empty. She shouted that Pei Ling had somehow escaped. The group, who had been so confident in their betrayal, immediately fell into a chaotic argument. Chen Huan barked at them to shut up. He ordered Chen Mei to use her tracking bees and take Huang Xian and Zhang Zhongqin to hunt Pei Ling down. He made it very clear that he wanted the boy brought back alive. Seeing how angry their leader was, the three didn't waste a second and followed the bees into the forest. However, after a short time, the tracking bees started acting strange. They seemed terrified of something ahead, buzzing frantically and refusing to move forward. Huang Xian's expression turned grim as he noted that there shouldn't be anything that dangerous in this area, unless it was the human-faced spider. Zhang Zhongqin argued that it was impossible, since the spider was supposed to be staying close to its eggs. As they debated, a massive cloud of dust rose on the horizon. It was Pei Ling, sprinting toward them at a breakneck pace. The three were initially overjoyed, thinking they had lucked out and found him easily, but their happiness turned to shock as Pei Ling shot past them like a streak of light. As he flew by, he thanked them for taking care of him and told them he hoped they enjoyed his parting gift. The three were stunned by his incredible speed, wondering what kind of high-level evasion technique he had mastered, but they didn't have time to wonder for long. A thunderous noise erupted from behind them as the giant human-faced spider finally caught up. Panic set in as the three scrambled for their lives. The spider spat out a thick strand of sticky silk, which instantly entangled Chen Mei, the weakest of the group. She was yanked backward, screaming desperately for her teammates to save her. Zhang Zhongqin wanted to rush back and help her, but Huang Xian stopped him immediately. He told him that they had to leave because she was already beyond saving. They could only watch in horror as Chen Mei was dragged into the path of the human-faced spider. A few miles away, Pei Ling heard the distant screams and looked back for a split second. He told himself not to feel guilty, as they were the ones who had planned to betray him first. The two survivors eventually made it back to Chen Huan. Seeing how beaten and disheveled they looked, Chen Huan knew something had gone horribly wrong. He demanded to know what happened and where his sister was. They explained that Pei Ling had led the human-faced spider right to them, and that they only managed to escape by using a dangerous speed-boosting technique, but his sister didn't make it. Xiao Tasha panicked, telling Chen Huan that they were no match for a monster that strong, and that they needed to leave immediately. However, Chen Huan acted like a loyal leader. He asked how they could just abandon their injured teammates. He suggested that their only hope was to use the Soul Devourer formation. He told the two men to hide inside the subarray and promised that once he and Xiao Tasha lured the spider into the illusion, they would be safe. The two men were worried and asked if the illusion could really trap a creature as powerful as that spider. Chen Huan looked them in the eye and asked if they really thought he would ever hurt his own friends after all they had been through. Xiao Tasha started to say something, but Chen Huan cut her off. Although the two men felt like something was wrong, they didn't have any other choice but to trust him. As soon as they walked away toward the trap, Chen Huan's face shifted into a cold sneer. He whispered to Xiao Tasha that once the two were inside, they would activate the entire formation and sacrifice them all together. It's a tragic reality for those who follow others blindly. One moment they were being treated like allies, and the next, they were being turned into fuel for a dark ritual. As the spider closed in, Chen Huan pushed them into the array, instantly transforming his friends into materials for his soul-summoning banner. His only disappointment was that since they were already badly injured, the quality of the banner wasn't as perfect as he had hoped. Then, while Xiao Tasha's back was turned, Chen Huan struck without warning, driving his hand straight through her chest to finish his ritual. Xiao Tasha was devastated, unable to understand why her partner would do this. She had helped him finish off so many others and done everything he asked, believing his promises that they would be together forever. Now, with a single betrayal. She was being turned into a part of the soul-summoning banner herself. Meanwhile, Chen Huan was overwhelmed with excitement. He celebrated the fact that his soul-summoning banner was finally complete. He told her soul that she could now accompany him forever, suggesting she should be happy about it. He even twisted the situation to claim he was keeping his promise to take her with him. The scene then shifts to Pei Ling, who had finally managed to scramble back to Screw Mountain City. His energy was completely drained, and he knew he needed powerful help. He decided the best person to turn to was the City Lord, and it turned out to be a smart move. After hearing the report, the City Lord immediately provided him with spiritual energy to help him recover. Once he felt a bit stronger, Pei Ling dropped to his knees and delivered the news. He told the Lord that a massive human-faced spider was on its way and claimed that Chen Huan had tried to use a dark ritual to trap and refine the beast. The City Lord was stunned, noting that even he wouldn't dare provoke such a powerful creature. He remarked that Chen Huan must have lost his mind. Pei Ling added that the plan had failed completely, the group had scattered, and he was the only one who had managed to get away. The City Lord was a cautious man, but after confirming the spider was indeed heading toward the city, he decided to head out to intervene. He figured that since Screw Mountain City was protected by the sect's powerful magical formations, he could safely retreat even if he couldn't defeat the beast. This made Pei Ling break out in a cold sweat. He realized that if the Lord actually rescued the others and learned the truth, he would be in deep trouble. However, there was no stopping the City Lord, so Pei Ling had to stay behind and try to think of a way to protect himself. Meanwhile, Chen Huan was running for his life in a miserable state. Even while fleeing, he was plotting how to make Pei Ling's life a living hell once he got back. He saw the city ahead and hoped to use the protective formation to kill the spider, thinking he could make a fortune from the monster's rare materials. Just then, the City Lord arrived on the scene. Chen Huan rushed toward him, desperately asking for help to take down the human-faced spider. Unexpectedly, the Lord didn't offer a hand. Instead, he landed a devastating blow right to Chen Huan's chest and snatched away his newly finished soul-summoning banner. In a split second, the City Lord completely broke the connection between Chen Huan and his soul-summoning banner. Chen Huan tried to threaten the Lord by bringing up the sect rules, but he didn't even get to finish his sentence before the human-faced spider caught up. Realizing his life was on the line, Chen Huan immediately dropped to his knees and begged for mercy. He told the Lord he could keep the soul-summoning banner as a gift and promised to serve the Duanmu family for generations if only the Lord would save him. However, the City Lord completely ignored the plea. With a simple wave of his hand, he essentially offered Chen Huan up as a peace offering to the giant spider. The Lord spoke to the creature, noting that since their power levels were equal, a fight would only hurt them both. He pointed out the dangerous abyssal demonic formation ahead and suggested the spider stop there. He admitted that while a young cultivator wasn't a perfect trade for the lost eggs, it was his sincere gesture of goodwill. The human-faced spider was smart enough to take the deal. It grabbed Chen Huan and turned back into the forest. Back in Screw Mountain City, the Lord put on a sad face and told Pei Ling how sorry he was. He claimed the spider was too fierce and that he had arrived just a moment too late to save Chen Huan. He lied, saying he had fought desperately and only managed to recover Chen Huan's belongings from the monster's mouth. Pei Ling was stunned. Realizing the Lord had actually gone out specifically to take the treasures for himself, he immediately dropped to his knees and started crying loudly, acting like he was devastated over losing such a good person like Chen Huan. He wondered aloud if the other teammates had survived. Seeing this, the Lord pretended to comfort him, saying the others had likely met a tragic end as well. He handed over a few items and scraps of clothing he claimed to have found, telling Pei Ling to keep them as mementos. Pei Ling looked at the junk on the table with total disdain, thinking there wasn't a single thing of value there. Then, unexpectedly, the Lord pulled out the soul-summoning banner, a rare and powerful artifact. He told Pei Ling he should take that too. Pei Ling was terrified. He knew that banner was made from the lives of his fellow disciples, and that he had almost been one of them. He worried that if he accepted such a valuable prize, the Lord might finish him off to keep the secret. He quickly pushed it back, saying that since his group had caused so much trouble for the city, the Lord should keep the banner as a gift. He even joked that Chen Huan would have wanted it that way. The Lord was pleased, thinking the kid really knew how to show proper respect. However, he had one more suspicious question. How did a level 6 leader like Chen Huan die, while a level 4 newcomer like Pei Ling managed to escape? He asked if Pei Ling had some hidden, extraordinary powers. Pei Ling knew he was in a tight spot and realized he had to mention his high-level connection. He explained that he was only out there because Li Liyue had ordered it, and that he wouldn't be allowed back to the sect if he failed. He claimed he only escaped because her assistant, Wu Lu, had secretly helped him. He made sure to add that Li Liu prefers to keep her involvement a secret. As soon as he heard that Pei Ling was connected to Li Liu, Duan Muyan's attitude flipped instantly. Instantly, he put on a wide smile and reassured Pei Ling that he had nothing to worry about. He suggested that if they both kept quiet about the details, Li Liu would never have to know. He even offered to handle the mission requirements himself, noting that things are much easier when you have friends in high places. True to his word, the city lord returned in no time, hardly longer than it takes for a stick of incense to burn, carrying the remains of both the purple-eyed ferret and the flower demon. However, when the lord asked Pei Ling to present his official mission documents to finalize the credit, Pei Ling was stunned. He realized then that Chen Huan and the others had never actually assigned him to the mission at all. Their only plan had been to lure him out and turn him into part of a soul-summoning banner. Pei Ling figured he could still file the paperwork at the General Affairs Hall later, but a much bigger problem was weighing on him. He still hadn't raised enough money to pay the massive fines for his 3 former roommates. He knew that if he went back now, the friends and families of those 3 would be waiting for him with anything but a warm welcome. When Pei Ling tried to suggest staying in the city for a few more days to buy time, the city lord firmly shut him down. He pointed out that since Pei Ling was the sole survivor, people would naturally suspect him of harming his teammates. He warned Pei Ling that he wouldn't want those accusations sticking to him, or worse, reflect poorly on the Holy Maiden. The lord insisted that Pei Ling return immediately to clear his name, even offering to provide evidence from his own office to support Pei Ling's story. If it seemed like Duan Muyan was being helpful, the reality was much more selfish. By sending Pei Ling back with an official report, the lord was clearing himself of any suspicion. This way, the soul-summoning banner he kept would look like a legitimate gift from a grateful survivor, rather than something he had stolen. Furthermore, if Pei Ling really was Li Liu's protege, the lord was successfully investing in a rising star. No matter how the situation turned out, the city lord had made sure he would come out on top. Pei Ling let out a heavy sigh, realizing he was being forced out. He figured he would just leave the city and look for a chance to disappear on the way back. However, the city lord didn't give him an inch. He arranged a yin corpse cloud for Pei Ling that was set on an automatic patrol route, leaving him absolutely no way to steer off course or escape. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the residence of Elder Li Ping at Huayin Peak. A woman named Han Su, who was Li Si's grandmother, was desperately crying for justice. She begged the elder to seek revenge for his own grandson. Li Ping's eyes flashed with anger as he asked about the other disciples who lived in the same courtyard, only to find out they had already been taken care of. This made Li Ping even more furious. He scolded her for getting rid of potential witnesses, pointing out that there was no way a newcomer like Pei Ling could have taken down all 3 disciples at once by himself. He realized that the real issue wasn't the boy, but whoever was pulling the strings behind the scenes. Elder Li Ping continued his analysis, noting that Li Si and his roommates died under a very specific and unusual blade technique. In the entire holy sect, there's only one person known for such a mysterious style, Zhen Jinshan. He theorized that, since Zhen Jinshan has a long-standing rivalry with another inner sect master, Miao Chengyang, this was a targeted hit. Pei Ling was likely just a tool used by Zhen Jinshan to take out Miao Chen, and Li Si was simply unlucky enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Li Ping figured that since Chen Huan had already taken Pei Ling out of the sect, the boy was likely already trapped inside a soul-summoning banner and was no longer a factor. However, moving against Zhen Jinshan wasn't easy because of his distant ties to Li Liu. Li Ping decided to play it safe. He instructed the Miao and Zhou families to have their representative, Zhou, keep Li Liu distracted. This would leave Zhen Jinshan without his primary backup, giving Miao Chengyang the perfect opening to strike. The scene then shifts to Zhen Jinshan, who was busy teaching a group of female disciples when Miao Chengyang suddenly burst through the door and started beating him. The students tried to step in to help their master, but Zhen Jinshan shouted at them to stay back. As the leader of the prestigious Jian Sang lineage, he felt he'd lose all his dignity if he needed his students to fight his battles. Faced with Miao Chengyang's pure rage, Zhen Jinshan could only try to dodge. When he finally got a chance to ask what was going on, he was accused of murdering Miao Chen. Zhen Jinshan was completely bewildered. He had no idea what they were talking about. But before he could even start to explain, Miao Chengyang launched another attack. Zhen Jinshan tried to defend himself while clarifying the situation, but Miao Chengyang pointed out that all the evidence pointed directly at him. He reminded Zhen Jinshan that he had even publicly threatened to seek revenge just a few days ago. Zhen Jinshan felt like his world was collapsing. He cursed whoever had leaked his private rants. He admitted he might have said those things, but he swore he hadn't actually killed anyone. Miao Chengyang wasn't listening. Consumed by anger, he continued his relentless assault until Zhen Jinshan was finally knocked unconscious. When Zhen Jinshan eventually opened his eyes, his rival was gone. He felt humiliated, realizing he had lost all respect in front of his disciples. Furious, he declared he would report this to the Elders' Hall immediately. However, his students delivered even worse news. Before leaving, Miao Chengyang had already announced he was heading to the Elders' Hall himself to pay the fine for the assault. He even made it a point to say he only spared Zhen Jinshan's life out of respect for Li Liu, a final insult to Zhen Jinshan's pride. While Zhen Jinshan was left fuming, wondering exactly who had framed him for such a messy crime, the actual culprit, Pei Ling, was casually making his way back. Pei Ling's mind was entirely occupied with a single problem: how to trick Zhen Jinshan into helping him cover that massive 90,000 spirit stone debt. Upon returning to the sect, Pei Ling's first stop was the administrative hall to turn in his mission materials. After some clever maneuvering with the rewards, he walked away with 167 low-grade spirit stones. Under normal circumstances, he'd be thrilled. 167 stones could buy plenty of useful gear at the treasure pavilion, but the memory of his 3 dead roommates loomed over him. Sure enough, the moment he stepped outside, he was intercepted by officials from the Elders' Hall. The Elders' Hall was terrifyingly efficient. They presented a mountain of evidence detailing Pei Ling's aggression toward his roommates. Realizing there was no use arguing with the sect's investigators, Pei Ling obediently signed and stamped the confession. To his slight relief, the elders were somewhat fair. They calculated his total fine at exactly 74,800 spirit stones. Even with the slight discount, Pei Ling was speechless. He couldn't imagine how he'd scraped that much together in just 3 months. But the steward of the Elders' Hall had more news, and it wasn't good. He informed Pei Ling that the Miao, Zhou, and Li families had already stepped in. They offered to pay the fine in full, on the condition that the sect handed Pei Ling over to them so they could end his life. Since the Elders' Hall assumed Pei Ling had no way to pay, they had already agreed to the deal. Pei Ling was horrified. He shouted at the steward, asking what happened to the 3-month grace period. The steward just sneered, reminding him that in the Heavy Mist sect, principles are flexible, but the sect's financial interests always come first. Thinking fast, Pei Ling played his only remaining card. He claimed he could pay the debt and insisted that Zhen Jinshan, the head of a prestigious inter-sect lineage, would personally vouch for him. The steward paused. He knew Zhen Jinshan was currently at odds with the Miao family, but he couldn't ignore the man's connection to Li Liyue. The steward decided to take Pei Ling to see Zhen Jinshan in person. He warned the boy that if he was lying, the consequences would be even more brutal. Meanwhile, back at his residence, a battered Zhen Jinshan was trying to drown his humiliation in alcohol. When he heard a knock at the door and realized it was the Elders' Hall, his heart sank. He assumed one of his disciples had screwed up again. Ashamed of his bruised face, he stayed behind a closed door, pretending to be in deep meditation while communicating from a distance. He was stunned to learn that the officials weren't there because of his disciples' usual antics, but because a kid named Pei Ling had killed 3 people and was now claiming Zhen Jinshan would pay the bill. When he heard the news, Zhen Jinshan's anger finally boiled over. Forgetting all about his bruised face or his reputation, he charged out of his room and grabbed Pei Ling by the throat. He roared that Pei Ling was the one who had actually killed Miao Chen, while he had been forced to take the beating and the blame for the mess. At that moment, Zhen Jinshan wanted nothing more than to chop Pei Ling into pieces. However, he knew that because of Li Leiwei's protection, he couldn't actually harm the boy. Swallowing his rage, he reluctantly signed the guarantee contract. As soon as the Elders' Hall officials left, Pei Ling was ecstatic, realizing his life was officially saved for now. But a second later, Zhen Jinshan threw a punch. It was just a warning, like swatting a fly, but Pei Ling could feel the genuine killing intent behind it. As Zhen Jinshan walked back toward his courtyard, he casually asked how much the fine actually was, since he was now the legal guarantor. When he heard the amount was over 74,000 spirit stones, he literally spat out a mouthful of blood. He cried out that even as a lineage head, he couldn't just produce that much cash. He realized the other families were setting him up to fail. He knew that if it weren't for the Saintess, he would have been barbecued by his enemies already. What shocked him most, though, was the power gap. Pei Ling, at level 4, had somehow taken down 3 higher-level cultivators at once while barely getting a scratch. It made sense why Li Liu was so interested in him, but it didn't solve the money problem. He told Pei Ling the various ways to earn stones and warned him that he'd better start working, or Zhen Jinshan would be the one forced to pay. Pei Ling thanked him and happily headed off, leaving a confused and broken Zhen Jinshan standing in the wind wondering why a level 4 kid was more successful at fighting than he was. Pei Ling decided to check out the different departments to see where the real money was. First, he visited the forging division. There, he saw a bizarre and disturbing sight. A woman was being whipped by a mature master, yet she seemed to be enjoying the pain, believing that enduring suffering was the only way to learn how to craft instruments that caused even greater agony to others. The scene was so twisted that Pei Ling lost interest in forging immediately. He moved on to Talisman Mountain, hoping for better luck. He tried his best to follow the instructions, but after a series of flashy, nonsensical movements, the only thing he managed to draw on the paper was a picture of Mario. But the real shock came when he learned about the materials. He discovered that the high-quality talisman paper wasn't made of wood or silk. It was made of human skin. To make matters worse, the very first lesson required every student to personally pick a live subject from a group of prisoners and skin them on the spot to create their own paper. Naturally, Pei Ling stayed as far away from that bloody scene as possible. Since forging was a nightmare and talismans were a horror show, he figured he'd give beast taming a shot, but his timing couldn't have been worse. Just as the instructor was giving a passionate speech about the importance of fully trusting your spirit beasts, the massive creature next to him snapped and bit the man's arm clean off. Terrified, Pei Ling bolted. He realized this was the true nature of a sinister sect. Nothing was normal. Was there actually anything a sane person could learn here? He had one last hope: alchemy. If alchemy failed, he'd just give up and sell the life-loathing blade to pay the debt. To his surprise, the lecturer at Elixir Mountain seemed like a relatively normal human being, which gave him a tiny spark of hope. As he sat there listening attentively, a notification suddenly popped up from his system. It had detected the teaching and was recording the entire alchemy process. Pei Ling was overjoyed. Finally, this dog of a system was doing something useful. He could already see himself becoming a wealthy master. Wasting no time, he headed to the herb shop run by the instructor and bought 2 sets of raw materials. He then rented out a grade D alchemy room, his heart racing with excitement. He pushed his worries about the past aside. Zhen Jinshan was his guarantor for the roommate situation, and Duan Muyan had likely covered up the mess with Chen Huan. His only job now was to make money. He summoned the system and switched to one-click automated mode. After 30 minutes of the system working its magic, the first batch of tempering bone pills was finished. He had produced 12 pills, and their quality was even better than the ones he'd seen before. He started doing the math: 2 batches an hour, 12 hours a day. In 3 months, he could make nearly 80,000 spirit stones. He immediately started a second batch, but things went south fast. Just as he tossed the herbs in, the furnace erupted in a loud explosion. Smoke filled the room, and the system calmly informed him that the session was over because his spiritual power was too low. Pei Ling was speechless. If he didn't have enough energy, why didn't the system tell him before blowing up his equipment? Now, he was down 10 spirit stones for the broken furnace. He rushed to the treasure house to sell his first 12 pills so he could pay for repairs. But as he arrived, he overheard people talking in the lobby. The buying price for tempering bone pills was only 5 spirit stones per pill. It was a total ripoff. He realized that even if he sold his soul to the furnace, the math wasn't adding up. But with his debt deadline ticking, he didn't have any other choice. He had to sell them for whatever he could get. Because of his ragged clothes and exhausted look, Pei Ling's attempt to sell his hard-earned medicine started off as a total disaster. The moment he stepped into the treasure house, even the shop's parrot started mocking him. When he finally made it to the appraisal room, he was met with nothing but insults from the assistants of a beautiful young alchemist nearby. Even the store's official purchaser took one look at Pei Ling's shabby appearance and laughed, assuming he had nothing of value. However, the system had actually delivered. When Pei Ling finally uncorked the bottle, the room was instantly filled with the overwhelming, rich aroma of high-grade tempering bone pills. The purchaser was stunned but still refused to believe Pei Ling had made them, accusing him of just being lucky enough to find them. Pei Ling bit his tongue, thinking that if he weren't so desperate for cash, he'd show them exactly what he was capable of. Fortunately, the store manager was far more experienced. The second he caught a whiff of that fragrance, he realized the quality was elite. He immediately slapped his rude assistant and apologized to Pei Ling, offering to buy the pills for 40 spirit stones each. Pei Ling was internally screaming with joy. That was 8 times the price he expected, but playing it cool to drive the price up, he put on a troubled, hesitant expression. This caught the attention of the resident genius alchemist, Jin Sumian. She looked at Pei Ling with sudden respect, knowing that while the ingredients for these pills were cheap, refining them to a high-grade level was actually harder than making foundation-building pills. She was convinced these were the work of a hidden master. Determined to study the pills to improve her own skills, Jin Sumian grabbed Pei Ling's hand and placed it over her heart, promising to pay 50 spirit stones per pill. She even offered to recommend him to Elder Shen, a powerful senior alchemist in the inner sect, a massive career boost. Just as Pei Ling was about to accept her offer, the store manager jumped between them. He warned Jin Sumian not to steal the treasure house's business and upped his offer to 60 spirit stones per pill. He even promised Pei Ling a 20% premium on all his future work. He turned to Pei Ling and told him to choose quick cash or a vague prospect of a future master. Pei Ling didn't hesitate for a second. He chose the 60 spirit stones, leaving the genius Jin Sumian completely speechless. He had a debt to pay after all. The manager was ecstatic, thinking about the massive profit he was about to make. He carefully began to separate the pills, warning Pei Ling not to mix high-grade ones with trash pills as it would ruin the purity. But as he looked closer, his jaw dropped. Every single one of the 12 pills in the bottle was high-grade. In the alchemy world, even a grandmaster might only produce one high-grade pill in dozens of attempts. Producing a perfect batch of 12 was unheard of, something only an extraordinary recluse living deep in the mountains could achieve. Realizing he was standing in the presence of a gold mine, the manager immediately dropped his ego and begged Pei Ling to introduce him to the master who had refined them. Jin Sumian, looking quite shy, pulled a bottle of foundation-building pills from her robes and handed it over. She didn't stop there. She pulled Pei Ling's arm close, making it clear she was desperate for an introduction to the master behind those pills. Even though the attention was definitely a plus, Pei Ling didn't budge. He knew exactly how this sinister sect worked. If a low-level cultivator with no backing was found out as a genius alchemist, he'd be kidnapped, locked in a basement, and turned into a human pill press, working under a literal whip every day. Thinking fast, he played the only card he had. He told told them he didn't know any hermit, that these pills were actually a gift from Jen Jinshan, the intersect elder. The store manager looked confused, noting he'd never heard of Jen Jinshan being an alchemist. Jin Sumian was also skeptical, but when she checked Pei Ling's hands, she noticed they didn't have the typical calluses or stains of a lifelong alchemist. She figured he was telling the truth. Only someone who didn't understand the value of such pills would sell them so casually at a shop. Plus, with Jen Jinshan being related to Li Liu, it was totally plausible he'd met a grandmaster through her. With Jen Jinshan successfully framed as the scapegoat, Pei Ling made his exit. After his expenses, he walked away with 620 spirit stones and a bonus bottle of pills. He couldn't help but wonder why he had wasted time on dangerous missions when alchemy was such a goldmine. But just as he was daydreaming about his future wealth, the air turned freezing. A pink spiritual chain lunged from the shadows, binding him tight. Having dealt with this before, Pei Ling wasn't even scared anymore, just annoyed. Wu Lu appeared in a flash, licking her finger with a playful smile. She reminded him that his 7-day deadline was up and asked how his progress with the vanishing technique was going. Pei Ling kept his cool and told her he'd mastered the vampire vanishing technique, asking her to release the pressure so he could prove it. Wu Lu looked completely disbelieving. She pointed to a withered tree far in the distance and told him to bring back a branch using the move, warning him that if he was lying, he was dead. Before she could even finish the threat, Pei Ling blurred. In a split second, he was back, holding the branch in his hand. Wu Lu was genuinely shocked. She stared at him, unable to believe he had actually learned a high-level evasion move in just 1 week. Pei Ling just scratched his head, thinking to himself, well, you're the one who told me I had to learn it or die. Feeling both embarrassed and furious that she'd been proven wrong so easily, Wu Lu vanished without another word. Pei Ling stood there completely baffled as Wu Lu vanished. He couldn't help but wonder why she had just bolted without a word. Meanwhile, Wu Lu had reappeared in Li Liu's chamber to report that Pei Ling had mastered the move way ahead of schedule. Li Liu's expression remained indifferent as she asked why Wu Lu had even checked on him, since the deadline hadn't arrived yet. Terrified, Wu Lu confessed that she had tried to play a prank on Pei Ling by cutting his training time from 2 weeks down to just 7 days. The moment she admitted it, Li Liu let out a cold snort. The sheer power of it caused Wu Lu to bleed from her ears and nose as she cried out in pain. Li Liu's gaze turned like ice as she ordered the ghost servant to get out and warned her never to act on her own again. Outside, Zhao Ni was waiting and let out a sigh of relief that Wu Lu had survived the encounter. She warned her friend that the master hates it when they take liberties, and if her soul imprint had been shattered, there would be no coming back. Wu Lu was still grumpy, complaining about how much Pei Ling was taking advantage of their master, but Zhao Ni whispered the harsh reality. Ever since Li Liu's purity was broken, her cultivation had been unstable, and her position as holy maiden was under threat. Enemies were already circling, and even their hound, Jen Jinshan, had been beaten up. Inside, Li Liu meditated while holding the 6 Desires manual. She marveled at the fact that while no one in the sect could restore the manual, Pei Ling had somehow incorporated it into his own body. Through their dual cultivation, he had channeled its power into her. While it had cost her dearly in terms of her status, it had massively boosted her strength. However, she noted that their progress had slowed down lately, and she wondered if it required more initiative from him next time, a thought that actually made her blush. On the other side of the sect, Pei Ling was working like a machine. He had successfully processed 5 batches of pills. 1 furnace blew up, he ate 1 batch himself to keep his energy up, and the other 3 produced a whopping 39 high-grade pills. This constant work, and the pills themselves, finally pushed him over the edge. He officially reached the 5th level of the Foundation Establishment realm. Now, his biggest headache was how to sell the goods. He knew he couldn't keep using Jen Jinshan as a cover without getting caught. In a moment of desperation, he decided to try a disguise, dressing up as a woman to hit the market. But the old shopkeeper at the treasure house saw right through it instantly. The old man just chuckled and teased him about young people and their weird hobbies, which sent a humiliated Pei Ling running for the exit. Realizing his disguise was a total failure, he headed back to Jen Jinshan's place to beg for help again. But as he approached, he heard a massive explosion from inside. He ducked behind a tree just in time to see a very aggressive, powerful-looking woman storming out of the courtyard, cursing Jen Jinshan's name. Following close behind her was Jin Sumian, the alchemy genius from before. She was trying to calm the woman down, telling her that a mere alchemy master wasn't worth the stress. She mentioned that the woman's cousin had already secured a mission to get the cold marrow fire for her. Jin Sumian promised that once she refined that rare flame, her alchemy skills would leave everyone else in the dust. Watching the 2 women storm off, Pei Ling's heart skipped a beat. Alchemy master? He had a sinking feeling that his little lie about Jen Jinshan being the source of those high-grade pills had spiraled out of control. Just as he was about to slip away into the shadows, a hand clamped onto his shoulder. Jen Jinshan had caught him red-handed. Already bruised and humiliated from his earlier encounter with the aggressive woman, Jen Jinshan was at his breaking point. He snarled at Pei Ling, complaining that ever since the boy arrived, he had become a literal punching bag for the entire sect. Seeing Pei Ling's shifty eyes, Jen Jinshan's intuition kicked in. He knew the alchemy master rumor was Pei Ling's fault. Pei Ling tried to play dumb, but Jen Jinshan wasn't having it. He threatened to drag him to a formal confrontation until Pei Ling finally cracked and confessed the truth. Learning that he had been slapped and had his door power kicked in because of Pei Ling's lie, Zhen Jinshan snapped. He grabbed Pei Ling, roaring that he wouldn't let him off alive this time. In a desperate bid for survival, Pei Ling yelled for Wu Lu to save him. The mention of Li Liue's ghost attendant worked like a cold bucket of water on Zhen Jinshan's rage. He realized that if Pei Ling was truly this talented, his goddess Li Liu must have a plan for him. To settle the matter, Zhen Jinshan made a deal. If Pei Ling could actually refine a high-grade tempering bone pill right in front of him, he would let the matter slide. Ouyang Xiangxing prepared the materials in the furnace. Unlike the others in this brutal sect, she cheered Pei Ling on with genuine gentleness. For a moment, Pei Ling was completely captivated by her kindness. It was the first time he felt actually cared for since transmigrating. Of course, Zhen Jinshan quickly barked him back to reality. Pei Ling didn't dare hesitate. He triggered the system's automated mode, and 30 minutes later, the furnace opened to reveal a batch of perfect high-grade pills. While Ouyang Xiangxing showered him with praise, Zhen Jinshan was a mix of shock and jealousy. He realized Pei Ling wasn't just lucky, he was a monster of talent. As Li Liue's self-appointed lapdog, Zhen Jinshan decided he had to support Pei Ling to stay in her good graces. He promised Pei Ling a great opportunity once he hit the 5th level of the Foundation Establishment realm, only to be floored when he realized Pei Ling was already there. Cultivating to the 5th level in mere days while mastering alchemy was beyond genius. It was terrifying. However, when Pei Ling heard the opportunity involved going to the GU Abyss to refine the cold marrow fire, he wanted no part of it. He remembered the shrew from earlier was also after that flame. He just wanted to hide and make money, not make more enemies. Zhen Jinshan tried to brainwash him with talk of glory, but Pei Ling was a survivalist at heart and stayed unmoved. Finally, Zhen Jinshan played his ultimate trump card. If Pei Ling successfully refined the cold marrow fire, Zhen Jinshan would personally pay off the 74,000 spirit stone fine for the deaths of Miao Chen and the others. As soon as the deal was on the table, Pei Ling's motivation hit an all-time high. Seeing him agree, Zhen Jinshan quickly organized a security detail, 3 Foundation Establishment disciples to escort and protect him. Pei Ling was internally shaken by such a heavy-duty arrangement. He knew that if he needed 3 bodyguards, the danger must be off the charts. He tried to use Wu Lu's name to guilt-trip Zhen Jinshan into coming along personally, but the branch master hesitated. As a leader of the lower 5 veins, he had to navigate the politics of the middle and upper veins and make external arrangements to forcefully secure this task. To compensate for his absence, he handed Pei Ling a 100 miles escape talisman, a literal get-out-of-jail-free card for emergencies. Under Zhen Jinshan's orders, Pei Ling and the trio of seniors set off for the GU Abyss. The journey was anything but pleasant. 2 of the disciples, Fan Ji and Shui Ying, were relentless with their mocking. They couldn't understand why the struggling joint mulberry vein was wasting precious resources and political capital to secure a high-level task for a mere outer disciple. Thankfully, Ouyang Xiangxing acted as Pei Ling's shield, shutting down the insults before they got too heated. But the gentle treatment ended abruptly when she grabbed Pei Ling and plummeted straight into the dark depths of the abyss. Meanwhile, word reached Miao Chengyang that Pei Ling had entered the Gu Abyss. He immediately decided to hunt him down there. If Pei Ling accidentally died in the abyss, the elders couldn't investigate, and Zhen Jinshan's expensive mission would be a total failure. It was a perfect revenge plot. Inside the abyss, Pei Ling was suffering. The chilling, sinister aura was seeping into his marrow, threatening to freeze his internal energy. Ouyang Xiangxing had to constantly feed him spiritual power just to keep him standing. Fan Ji used the opportunity to call him a weakling, while Shui Ying played the good cop, telling Ouyang to save her strength and promising to look after the boy himself. Pei Ling watched Shui Ying cautiously, wondering if this honest guy was actually trustworthy. They soon reached the entrance of the Dream Forest. Shui Ying picked up a simple wooden stick and told Pei Ling to grip it tightly. He warned him that once they entered, he must ignore every hallucination and just follow the stick. Pei Ling clung to it like a lifeline, but the moment they stepped into the trees, Shui Ying vanished into thin air. Pei Ling panicked for a second until he felt the stick still in his hand, but then the texture changed. The cold wood turned into a soft, warm hand. He looked down and saw Li Liu. He was instantly suspicious. There was no way the Saintess was wandering around this dump. His confusion turned to pure shock when the Li Liu tackled him to the ground and began stripping off her clothes with aggressive intent. Staring at her stunning, naked form, Pei Ling's heart was racing. Any normal man would have lost his mind, but his survival instincts kicked in. He knew the real Li Liu would never be this proactive, especially not in a public forest. "It's an illusion," he screamed in his head. Just as the phantom was about to initiate dual cultivation, Pei Ling summoned every ounce of willpower, struggled free, and scrambled away. In the very spot where Pei Ling had been lying, thick, thorny vines suddenly erupted from the ground. A chill ran down his spine as he realized that if he hadn't moved, he'd be a human pincushion. With the Li Liu illusion shattered, the forest stopped playing games. The hidden entity unleashed a swarm of vines, lashing out at him with lethal intent. Pei Ling wasn't about to die without a fight. He drew his blade and unleashed a ferocious strike from the blood slaughter technique, aiming right at the heart of the monster. But the world blurred. Suddenly, Ouyang Xiangxing appeared out of thin air, grabbing his arm and yanking him out of the trance. As his vision cleared, Pei Ling broke into a cold sweat. He looked down and saw his blade mere inches from his own throat. His heroic strike against the monster had actually been directed at himself. If Ouyang Xiangxing hadn't risked her own life to catch the sharp edge of the life-loathing blade with her bare hands, he would have been his own executioner. They say heroes can't resist a beautiful face, and having 3 identical saintesses throw themselves at him was a test no man was built to pass. If it weren't for Ouyang Xiangxing's timely arrival, Pei Ling's head would already be rolling on the forest floor. Once he caught his breath, Ouyang Xiangxing asked what happened to Shui Ying. Pei Ling looked embarrassed as he explained that the senior brother who was supposed to be leading him had vanished the second they entered the woods, and the lifeline stick had turned into a trap. He wondered if Sui Ying had been snatched by the forest too. Ouyang Xiangxing didn't waste time looking for him. She grabbed Pei Ling's hand and bolted for the exit, but the forest wasn't letting them go that easily. Countless vines surged from the earth, cutting off their escape. Pei Ling's luck was truly cursed. The vengeful spirits born from the resentment of dead cultivators only wake up twice a century, and he managed to catch them on his very first day. The exit was right there, but a wall of vines and shrieking spirits blocked their path. Pei Ling swung the life-loathing blade with all his might, but the vines were like iron. His blade couldn't even leave a scratch. Just as he was marveling at how Ouyang Xiangxing was holding them all back with her raw power, a tiny, stealthy vine pierced right through his leg. Instantly, the world shifted again. 3 versions of Li Liwei appeared, all seductive and beckoning him. He felt himself slipping away, his mind drowning in the pleasure of the illusion. Fortunately, Ouyang Xiangxing's voice cut through the fog like a lightning bolt, snapping him back to reality. "That was too close!" Pei Ling gasped. Seeing how relentless the spirits were, he realized that if they both tried to fight their way out, neither would make it. He felt a pang of sadness at the thought of such a kind senior dying here. He begged her to go on alone, reminding her that he had Zhen Jinshan's 100 miles escape talisman and could warp out if things got too ugly. But Ouyang Xiangxing was as stubborn as she was kind. She was determined to see him get that cold marrow fire. She slammed the massive black coffin she had been carrying onto the ground. As the lid creaked open, thousands of black chains exploded outward, whipping through the air and shredding the forest's vines into splinters. Taking advantage of the spirit's screams of pain, she grabbed Pei Ling and sprinted out of the dream forest. But the power of that coffin was clearly beyond her limits. As they reached safety, she looked pale and exhausted, having sacrificed a massive amount of her own life force just to get them through. As Pei Ling watched Ouyang Xiangxing cough up blood, he rushed to her side, his heart sinking with worry. She brushed it off, telling him it was nothing serious, but she made him promise never to speak of the black coffin to anyone. Pei Ling agreed immediately, his loyalty to her deepening. Just then, Fang Ji and Shui Ying sauntered over. Seeing their fake, oh-so-concerned faces made Pei Ling's blood boil. He had originally hoped that Shui Ying had just gotten separated by accident in the dream forest, but seeing that smug look, he knew the truth. The brat had left him to die in those illusions on purpose. Shui Ying might look honest and friendly, but his heart was pure poison, and he wasn't done yet. As they reached the yin-yang serpent vessel, Shui Ying was already plotting his next move. The serpent vessel is a treacherous, narrow bridge where the balancing energies of yin and yang are the only thing keeping you safe. One slip and you're gone. Certain death for any foundation-level cultivator. Even Fang Ji was playing mind games, helpfully suggesting that Pei Ling should just give up on the cold marrow fire before he accidentally fell and left no trace behind. Ouyang Xiangxing, despite her weakness, stepped in and warned Fang Ji that if he stayed this useless and lazy, she'd deal with him herself. Seeing her fury, Fang Ji backed down. Shui Ying wanted to give Pei Ling a shove, but he was too scared of Ouyang to act openly. However, he didn't count on Pei Ling's cunning. Suddenly, Pei Ling tripped and tumbled off the edge, but not before pointing a finger and screaming that Shui Ying had pushed him. Shui Ying was completely blindsided, stammering that he hadn't even touched the kid, but Ouyang Xiangxing was already seeing red. As they argued, Pei Ling activated his vampire vanishing technique, blurring through the air and landing safely back on the bridge. The speed and elegance of the move left them all stunned. Pei Ling didn't miss a beat. He ran straight to Ouyang Xiangxing like a victim, crying about how Zhu Ying tried to murder him and begging her to do something. Shui Ying tried to defend himself, but Ouyang didn't want to hear it. She pulled out the bone-blooming flower, a brutal torture artifact. Fang Ji tried to speak up for his buddy, but she shut him down instantly. Left with no choice, Shui Ying had to take the punishment. Ouyang slammed the flower into his chest, and he let out a blood-curdling scream as illusory bone chains ripped through his body, leaving him covered in painful wounds. Since he was a Foundation Realm cultivator, it didn't kill him, but it hurt like hell. Pei Ling watched with a smug grin, thinking, "You think your little tricks can beat me? Compared to the way the system messes with my life, you're an amateur." With Shui Ying properly humbled, the group finally pushed forward into the Bone Crane Marsh. marsh. In the very center of the swamp, glowing with an icy spectral light, was the cold marrow fire. Pei Ling's eyes practically turned into spirit stones at the sight of it. Zhu Ying, still nursing his wounds and his pride, just scoffed at him, thinking that only a country bumpkin would get so excited over a mere rare flame. Ouyang Xiangxing wasted no time, ordering Xue Ying to set up a formation to purge the overwhelming yin energy surrounding the cold marrow fire. With a sharp shout, Zhu Ying sent his formation flags flying into the swamp. They swelled in the wind and slammed into the bone crane marsh, boxing the spectral flame into a glowing cage. As the ritual began, Ouyang turned to Pei Ling with a serious warning. Absorbing a rare flame is an agonizing process, and he had to endure it so as not to waste the sect master's hard work in political maneuvering. Pei Ling nodded, then innocently asked if he should just swallow the fire or if there was a specific trick to it. The entire group went dead silent. After all the life and death struggles to get here, they realized Pei Ling didn't even know the basic fire absorption technique. Fang Ji scoffed, mocking that if Pei Ling was this clueless, they might as well pack up and go home right now. Ouyang Xiangxing was equally puzzled, but Pei Ling awkwardly explained that he was so new to alchemy, he just hadn't reached that chapter yet. Fang Ji tried to use this as an excuse to retreat, pointing out that even a genius would need at least half a month to master the technique. Fed up with his constant negativity, Ouyang Xiangxing delivered a sharp slap to Fang Ji's face. She didn't care if it took half a month or a half a year, they weren't leaving. Xue Ying watched the slap and cursed silently, bitter that Ouyang was acting like such a loyal dog to Zhen Jinshan by protecting a mere foundation-level brat. He comforted himself with the thought that they were running out of time anyway. Ouyang began to verbally explain the technique, planning to give a deep dive lesson, but she didn't realize that Pei Ling's system had already recorded the entire thing the moment she opened her mouth. As Pei Ling wondered how to explain that he was already a master of the technique, Xue Ying finished the formation. Ouyang Xiangxing didn't take any chances. She snatched the core control flag and the compass from his hands. Then, using the bone-blooming flower she had planted in him earlier, she triggered a spell that wrapped Zhu Ying in a restrictive cocoon. She knew he was a flight risk, and she was being 100% professional about his supervision. With the formation active, the thick yin mist was successfully stripped away from the cold marrow fire. Once the flame was purified, Ouyang decided to move the operation to the yin mushroom cave, giving Pei Ling a safe place to study the technique. Fang Ji tried to argue again, claiming the path to the cave was too dangerous for them to guard him. Ouyang Xiangxing shut him down with a chilling resolve. She declared that if they met an enemy, she would open the black coffin again and fight to the death. Fang Ji and the cocoon Xue Ying were stunned. They knew that using the coffin in the dream forest had nearly killed her. The fact that she was willing to do it again for an outer disciple was absolutely insane. Pei Ling didn't want to see his senior risk her life again. He immediately spoke up, insisting that he wanted to try the fire absorption technique right then and there. Ouyang Xiangxing, who had been protecting him like a guardian angel, was horrified. She tried to talk him out of it, knowing how suicidal it was to rush such a dangerous process, but Pei Ling was determined, or rather, the system was. He ignored her pleas and activated the automated mode to start devouring the cold marrow fire. Fang Ji, who had been praying for Pei Ling's downfall from day one, suddenly started praising him, encouraging him to go for it. He was secretly laughing, certain that even a once-in-a-century genius would be incinerated by the backlash. He expected to see Pei Ling turned into a pile of ash within seconds, but the universe had other plans. Under the system's cold robotic control, the absorption looked effortless. Pei Ling's face was a mask of calm, showing no signs of the agony everyone expected, but internally he was screaming. The sensation of icy flames melting his meridians was unbearable. He desperately wanted to pull back, but the system, as always, ignored his pain and kept pushing the flame deeper into his core. Seeing the impossible actually happening, Xu Ying went into a frenzy. If Pei Ling successfully bonded with a rare flame, his value to the sect would skyrocket, and the joint mulberry vein would rise with him. That would make Xu Ying's secret alliance with the Miao family completely worthless. Panic-stricken, Xue Ying forced his energy to the limit, shattering the cocoon Ouyang Xiangxing had placed him in. He lunged forward, intent on murdering Pei Ling mid-cultivation. Ouyang Xiangxing sensed the murderous intent and moved to intercept him, but the air suddenly grew heavy. Miao Chengyang appeared in a flash of power, blocking her and saving his lackey. Realizing she was outmatched, Ouyang screamed for Fang Ji to take Pei Ling and run while she held them off. Fang Ji shouted his agreement, but as he moved toward Pei Ling, he didn't reach out to grab him. He raised 2 poisoned steel needles, aiming them straight at Pei Ling's throat. Ouyang Xiangxing's reflexes were just fast enough. She knocked the needles aside, saving Pei Ling's life once again. Miao Chengyang, the strongest one there, didn't even bother attacking yet. He stood back with a cruel smirk, wanting to savor the moment. He wanted Pei Ling to feel the sting of being betrayed by everyone he trusted before he slowly tortured the boy to death. Fang Ji, showing his true colors, bowed to Miao Chengyang with a disgusting, fawning smile. He told Ouyang that they stood no chance and urged her to join them in serving the Miao family. Ouyang Xiangxing's heart sank, but her resolve didn't waver. She snarled that she would never betray her sect or her principles to crawl at the feet of a traitor. Seeing she wouldn't budge, Miao Chengyang lost patience and attacked. Ouyang Shangxing slammed her black coffin down, unleashing the iron chains in a desperate defense. But Miao Chengyang moved like a ghost, easily dodging the chains. Ouyang was shocked. He was using a high-level movement technique similar to the one Pei Ling had mastered. The gap in their cultivation levels was simply too wide. Just as she felt the end was near, Miao Chengyang suddenly vanished. One moment he was mid-strike, and the next, he was gone. Fang Ji and Xue Ying stood there, blinking in confusion. Miao Chengyang found himself trapped in a silent, surreal illusion. A woman in a yellow dress sat nearby, calmly embroidering. Without looking up, she invited him to take a seat. It was Zhao Ni, Li Liue's other attendant. With the terrifying Miao Chengyang removed from the board by Zhao Ni's intervention, the tables on the battlefield had turned in an instant. Ouyang Shangxing was already far stronger than the two traitors. The only reason Xue Ying and Fang Ji had dared to bite the hand that fed them was because they felt safe behind Miao Chengyang's shadow. Now that their protector had vanished, Ouyang Shangxing didn't hold back an ounce of her fury. She slammed the black coffin open, but this time, it wasn't just chains. A pale young girl in a vibrant red dress rose from the darkness. With a single flick of her wrist, the girl unleashed a storm of lethal bone spikes. Fang Ji desperately summoned his auspicious patterned furnace to block the hail of bone, but their energy was flagging. They could only pray that Miao Chengyang would return and save them from the slaughter. Little did they know, Miao Chengyang was trapped in a nightmare he couldn't fight. Inside the illusion, he realized the woman embroidering before him was Zhao Ni, Li Liue's personal attendant. He demanded to know her purpose, and her answer was a chilling command: "Don't touch Pei Ling." The revelation hit Miao Chengyang like a physical blow. He finally understood that Pei Ling's true patron wasn't the weak Zhen Jinshan, but the holy maiden herself. Still, his hatred for the boy was an inner demon he couldn't suppress. He tried to refuse, but a sharp pain sliced across his cheek. He looked at Zhao Ni and saw her stabbing 3 silver needles into an embroidery of his own face. Before he could strike back, an invisible force slammed into his chest, sending him tumbling. Zhao Ni's voice remained calm as she explained that if Pei Ling had died while absorbing the fire, she wouldn't have lifted a finger. The sect has no room for the weak, but since he survived, Miao Chengyang's luck had run out. She offered him a deal: swear to keep this meeting a secret and vow not to touch Pei Ling until he officially joins the inner sect, and he would be allowed to live. Miao Chengyang realized this was his only out. He confirmed that once Pei Ling was in the inner sect, he was fair game. Zhao Ni didn't deny it. If Pei Ling couldn't survive the inner sect's brutality, he was worthless to her master anyway. Swallowing his pride, he made the vows. Just as he turned to leave, Zhao Ni stopped him with a terrifyingly polite request: "Now that you're here, drink this cup of tea before you go." The scene shifts back to the marsh, where Xue Ying and Fang Ji were at their literal wits' end. Seeing the girl in red closing in, Xue Ying screamed for them to use Pei Ling as a human shield. Fang Ji didn't hesitate, releasing a swarm of glimmering glimworm goo, tiny luminous insects that could burrow into a cultivator's brain, straight at the meditating Pei Ling. Ouyang Xiangxing diverted the red-clad girl to intercept the bugs, but the goo were too agile and dodged the attack. This split-second distraction was exactly what Fang Ji wanted. He lunged at Ouyang, driving a punch loaded with 3 poisoned steel needles into her. She was sent flying, coughing up blood as the poison began to take hold. Just then, Pei Ling's eyes snapped open. He had successfully bonded with the cold marrow fire, but the cost was high. His skin was a roadmap of black and blue burns, and his body was screaming in agony. As the glimworm goo lunged for his face, he tried to draw his blade, but his charred fingers couldn't even grip the hilt. The life-loathing blade clattered to the ground. Facing death, Pei Ling didn't panic. He triggered the system. Cultivate the bloodthirsty blade technique. The system took over his broken body with cold efficiency. It didn't need a physical blade. Using the raw, violent energy of the technique, the system forced Pei Ling into a blur of motion. Before the severely injured Xue Ying could react, Pei Ling was upon him. In a flash of blood-red light, Xue Ying was slain where he stood, and every drop of his bloodthirsty aura was sucked into Pei Ling's body, fueling his recovery and his new dark power. Pei Ling didn't waste a single breath. Using another ruthless move of the bloodthirsty blade technique, he drained every last drop of Fang Ji's aura, leaving the traitor as a hollow husk. Just as he was about to continue his rampage, a hand firmly patted his shoulder, instantly snapping him out of the system's automated mode. This was the emergency stop Pei Ling had taught Ouyang Xiangxing. After all, the damn system doesn't distinguish between friend and foe, and who knew what outrageous thing it would force him to do next. But when he turned around, it wasn't Ouyang. He was met with the chilling sight of the red-clad girl from the coffin. Her eyes were bloodshot, and a wicked smirk twisted her face. Before he could even speak, she unleashed a wave of bone spikes aimed directly at him. Pei Ling barely managed to parry with a life-loathing blade. Fortunately, the blood energy he just absorbed from Xue Ying and Fang Ji gave him the strength to hold his ground against the onslaught. Just as the red-clad girl seemed to lose all control, several several heavy iron chains whipped out from the black coffin, dragging her back into the dark depths and slamming the lid shut. Pei Ling's mind raced. Was this Wu Lu's doing again? He had no idea that Wu Lu was currently being punished for her past pranks. In her place, Zhao Ni appeared. Pei Ling, feeling a surge of gratitude and perhaps a bit of hope, tried to play up his connection to her, but Zhao Ni wasn't having it. She kicked him away without a second thought, coldly reminding him that their master has no use for useless people. She told him he should count himself lucky just to be alive. Pei Ling was speechless, but ever the opportunist, he tried to ask if Li Liyue had any new techniques for him to learn. By the time he finished the sentence, Zhao Ni had already vanished into thin air. The scene shifts back to the sect, where Pei Ling recounted the entire blood-soaked mission to Zhen Jinshan. Hearing about the betrayal of his two senior disciples, Zhen Jinshan flew into a rage. He cursed them as ungrateful freeloaders who deserved their miserable ends. However, hearing that Miao Chengyang had been dragged off by Zhao Ni brought a smug smile to his face. He knew exactly what Zhao Ni was capable of. Even if Miao Chengyang survived her tea party, he'd be wishing he hadn't. Seeing his protector in a good mood, Pei Ling cautiously brought up the matter of his 74,000 spirit stone fine. But Zhen Jinshan suddenly developed a case of selective memory. He completely ignored his previous promise to pay the bill. Instead, he clapped Pei Ling on the back and told him that since he now possessed the cold marrow fire, a paltry 100,000 fine was nothing. He assured Pei Ling that he'd be able to earn it back in no time. Pei Ling stood there, completely stunned by the man's total lack of martial ethics. Meanwhile, Miao Chengyang was in a state of pure agony. Not only was he severely injured from the illusion, but he was also suffering from a lingering toxic venom. Humiliated and furious, he roared at his disciples to find Pei Ling's family and slaughter every last one of them. He wanted Pei Ling to feel the soul-crushing pain of losing everyone he loved. One of his more sensible disciples stepped forward to advise against it. He warned that targeting a low-level disciple's family would make Miao Chengyang look weak, as if he couldn't handle the boy himself. Plus, if the powerful Zhou family heard about it, it could damage their sect's reputation. More importantly, he reminded the master that Pei Ling had been treated poorly by his own clan for years. Killing them might not even bother the kid. The disciple offered a different trap. There is a female cultivator in the outer sect with a connection to him. No man below the Foundation realm can resist the allure of a beautiful woman. The scene shifts to a courtyard in the outer sect. A crowd of Foundation establishment disciples has gathered around a stunningly beautiful woman. She sits gracefully, playing a zither, her elegant movements highlighting her alluring curves. It's hard to tell if the crowd is cheering for the music or for the view of her well-endowed chest, but the air is filled with rowdy applause. Sun Yinlin, the star of the courtyard, played the part of a gentle beauty perfectly, but her heart was cold. She looked at the crowd of 3rd and 4th level protectors surrounding her with pure disdain, wondering when a real talent would finally notice her. Her thoughts were interrupted by a thunderous crash as a powerful newcomer arrived. The sycophants, who had just promised to die for her, scattered like leaves in the wind the second they sensed the stranger's Foundation realm pressure. Only one man, Pei Hongnian, stood his ground, though his trembling knees betrayed him. Sun Yinlin didn't appreciate the gesture. She shoved him aside and threw herself at the powerful stranger, turning on her most seductive charms. She expected a warm embrace, but the stranger had zero interest in her beauty. He grabbed her by the head and pinned her face first into the dirt. He sneered that the outer sect was full of trash-level beauties like her. He gave her a cold ultimatum: seduce Pei Ling within 15 days, or her life was forfeit. The scene shifts to Pei Ling, who was busy shopping for alchemy herbs when he felt a soft, warm presence press against his back. Before he could react, Sun Yinlan was already all over him. Pei Ling shoved her away instinctively, and she tumbled to the ground, immediately putting on a tearful, pitiful act. Pei Ling was more annoyed than attracted. He knew that, if he accidentally injured a fellow disciple, he'd be dragged back to the disciplinary hall and slapped with even more fines. Helpless, he helped her up and apologized. Sun Yinlin smirked internally. She was convinced all men were the same. She popped a love pill into her mouth to amplify her aura and began to work her charms. With her natural curves and the pill's energy, she was nearly irresistible. But Pei Ling wasn't an idiot. He remembered that Sun Yinlin used to hate his guts. Why was she being so proactive now? He smelled a trap. Without saying a word, he turned and bolted. Sun Yinlin wouldn't let him go. No matter where Pei Ling hid, even in the men's bathhouse, she managed to track him down. Cornered and desperate for some peace, Pei Ling fled to the Hall of Laws and Regulations, knowing the individual cultivation rooms there had strict privacy seals. However, as he burst into a chamber, he found himself face to face with Li Liyue. Completely mortified, he began stammering an explanation that he wasn't trying to peek. Li Liyue didn't seem angry. After all, they had shared several candid sessions before. Even if Pei Ling had been unconscious for most of them, she was actually impressed that he had managed to resist Sun Yinlan's spell on his own. She started to think, when she controlled him like a puppet during dual cultivation, his progress was slow. What if she did it while he was fully conscious? She decided that if things got too awkward afterward, she could just wipe his memory. Pei Ling felt the invisible weight of her gaze and tried to sneak away, but she called him back with a single word. Trembling, he approached her, every step feeling like 1,000 miles. He was terrified she had found out about him using her name as a shield and was about to execute him. Instead, Li Liyue opened her mouth and commanded him to perform the 6 Desires secret technique. Pei Ling stood there, completely bewildered. He had no idea what she was talking about. He didn't realize that the nameless technique he had been practicing was actually the legendary Six Desires technique. Pei Ling looked completely lost and could only stammer that he had never even heard of the Six Desires secret technique. Li Liyue used a secret detection method and realized he wasn't lying. She assumed that since he had only recently awakened, his memories were still fragmented, but for someone as decisive as her, this was an easy fix. She suddenly stood up and grabbed him by the neck. Pei Ling broke out in a cold sweat, thinking his time was up, but instead of a killing blow, Li Liyue pulled him into a deep kiss. In an instant, a familiar powerful sensation flooded his senses, and his spiritual energy began to roar like a tidal wave. Wait, he realized, is the nameless technique actually the Six Desires secret technique? For a split second, he considered letting the system take over, but he quickly dismissed the thought. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It was time to stop being a victim and finally show some heroism. He abandoned all hesitation and pulled Li Liyue into his arms. Amidst the sound of splashing water, the two began a conscious practice of the Six Desires in the pool. For the first time, Li Liu truly experienced the unbridled pleasure of dual cultivation. The sheer impact of the spiritual surge was so overwhelming that she momentarily lost herself in the sensation. Disclaimer: this is purely a fictional story made for entertainment only. Don't be influenced to hurt anyone's emotions, or don't do squeezing before marriage. If you still go ahead, it's completely your own responsibility. Pei Ling, fueled by his extraordinary physique and sheer willpower, pushed himself to the limit. He maintained the cultivation for half a month straight without a single moment of sleep. Yet, despite displaying every martial art form he knew, he still couldn't fully satisfy Li Liu. She felt that this half month of conscious practice lacked the mysterious, deep resonance of their very first time. When the session finally ended, Li Liyue casually tidied her hair and tossed Pei Ling's clothes onto his face. Her attitude shifted instantly. As soon as she was dressed, she looked at him as if he were a complete stranger. She coldly told him he could leave. Pei Ling, clutching his sore waist and feeling like he'd been completely drained of his life force, could only manage a forced smile, but the worst was yet to come. As he turned to leave, Li Liu reached out to erase his memories of the past 2 weeks. Pei Ling was outraged. "I've been working myself to the bone for you, and instead of a thank you, you're going to wipe my brain? Where's the fairness in that?" Li Liu didn't care about his complaints. She executed the spell and the world went black. When Pei Ling finally woke up, he felt a stabbing pain in his lower back. He looked around, confused. Why did I fall asleep here? And why does my waist hurt so much? Again? He shook his head, unable to solve the mystery, and decided to just drop it. He figured Sun Yinlin must be gone by now, and that it was high time to get out of the Hall of All Laws. However, as he reached the exit, a hulking yaksha blocked his path. The guard informed him that according to the rules of the hall, no one leaves without buying something. Pei Ling sighed. This kind of forced shopping was exactly the kind of shady business he expected from this sect. He decided to just pay up to avoid any more trouble. His only regret was that since you had to pay before seeing the manuals, he couldn't use his system to record the entire library for free. Cornered by the yaksha's mandatory shopping policy, Pei Ling scanned the shelves for something cheap. His eyes snagged on a fascinating manual that allowed the user to plunder the vitality of surrounding plants and creatures to heal themselves. It sounded perfect until he read the fine print. If he accidentally drained the sect's prize-winning flora or a senior's pet, the fines would be catastrophic. He could already see himself being hunted down by debt collectors, so he quickly moved on. Finally, he found a budget-friendly technique for only 800 spirit stones that focused on corpse manipulation and feigning death. As he flipped through it, weird, blurry images flashed in his mind. He felt a nagging sense that he was forgetting something incredibly important, but no matter how hard he tried to remember, his mind remained a blank wall. He sighed and bought the manual anyway, figuring he'd study it once he finished his pill factory marathon. What really baffled Pei Ling, though, was the time. He felt like he'd only taken a short nap, but the tower guardian insisted he'd been inside for a full half month. When Pei Ling tried to argue that the man was clearly mistaken, the guardian gave him a deadpan look. "There was only one person who entered this hall naked and came out wearing clothes," the guard remarked, "and that's you." Pei Ling was speechless. He had lost 15 days of prime money-making time. The only silver lining was that Sun Yinlan, the persistent honey trap, was nowhere to be seen. Taking advantage of his freedom, he rushed back to his furnace and worked like a man possessed. After another 2 weeks of non-stop alchemy, Pei Ling headed to Zhen Jinshan's courtyard to check on the profits from his first batch. He was greeted by a man wrapped so heavily in bandages he looked like a mummy. Before Pei Ling could ask who had beaten him up this time, Zhen Jinshan cut him off. He proudly announced that he had smoothed things over with the sect regarding Pei Ling's incidents, and delivered the best news yet. The top-grade tempering bone pills were a massive hit. Zhen Jinshan explained that each of those top-grade pills could be traded for 1 medium-grade spirit stone, and 1 medium-grade stone was worth 10,000 low-grade ones. Pei Ling was floored. He hadn't realized he was literally printing a fortune. He immediately handed over another 120 pills for sale, leaving Zhen Jinshan in total shock. The lineage head couldn't believe Pei Ling could produce such a massive quantity of impossible pills in such a short time. He noted that the local markets couldn't handle this much volume without crashing the price. The only option was to sell them at the Wanhui Sea. It was a lawless gray zone outside the control of the 9 sects, a paradise for rogue cultivators and shady deals. As soon as Pei Ling heard lawless and outside the sect's protection, his survival instincts flared, and he immediately lost all interest in going. Just then, Zhen Jinshan noticed something even more terrifying. Pei Ling's cultivation had somehow jumped to the peak of the 6th level of the Foundation establishment realm. He stared at the boy with genuine fear. Talent like this was unheard of. Pei Ling was just as confused. He thought he'd just been making pills. Realizing he was looking at a once-in-a-thousand-years monster, Zhen Jinshan became genuinely supportive. He sent Pei Ling back to keep up the alchemy and started plotting ways to secure high-grade cultivation pills, or even the secret formulas to fuel Pei Ling's growth. He knew that if he backed this genius correctly, his own future was set. Back at his residence, Pei Ling saw that his financial nightmare was finally coming to an end. With the fine nearly covered, he decided it was time to push his cultivation even further. He opened the system and initiated the bone tempering technique, but a familiar, sinking feeling washed over him when a notification popped up. The system detected a lack of the necessary breakthrough medicine, the cultivating jade pill, and generously offered to provide a high-grade version for free. Before he could even process what that meant, the system hijacked his body and sprinted out the door. Across the sect, Jin Sumian had just emerged from her own meditation. She proudly showed her elder sister the high-grade cultivating jade pill she had painstakingly refined, earning a round of praise. Riding the high of her success, she begged her sister to take her to the Gu Abyss for the cold marrow fire. Her sister sighed, informing her that Zhen Jinshan had already snatched it. To make amends, Zhen Jinshan had sent over 9 dark cold spring water as compensation. While the spring water was technically superior for tempering the body and soul, Jin Sumian was an alchemist at heart. She wanted the flame, not the water. Her sister tried to calm her down, explaining that Zhen Jinshan wouldn't reveal who he took the fire for, only that it was a direct order from the recently emerged Li Liu. Not wanting to start a war with the saintess, her sister promised to at least give Zhen Jinshan a lesson to vent Jin Sumian's frustration. After her sister left, a grumpy Jin Sumian decided to settle for second best. She headed to her private hot spring to immerse the cold spring water for her cultivation. Suddenly, a talisman flickered nearby. It was her senior, Lu Chong, bringing news of a rare foundation-level pill formula. To get it, Jin Sumian would have to join Zhang Shuo's team for a mission to Hanxi Mountain Villa. The mission involved finding the Crimson Beard Vine. Zhang Shuo promised that if she could refine 2 foundation pills for him, both the vine and the secret formula would be hers. Driven by the chance to level up her alchemy, Jin Sumian agreed instantly. Once Lu Chang left, she stripped off her clothes, left them on the shore, and stepped into the water to begin the agonizing process of absorbing the 9 dark, cold spring energy. The water was brutal. It felt like a net of icy whips lashing her skin simultaneously, but she gritted her teeth and bore the pain. As she was lost in the intensity of her training, a silent figure drifted into the area. Without a hint of hesitation or shame, the intruder began rummaging through Jin Sumian's clothes on the shore, looking for the high-grade pill she had just bragged about. Jin Sumian noticed the intruder immediately, but she was trapped in the middle of her tempering process. Moving even an inch would trigger a violent energy backlash. She could only watch in silent horror, praying this stranger wasn't a predator. However, the reality was even more absurd. The figure, controlled by the gift-giving system, first swallowed her hard-earned high-grade cultivating jade pill and then walked straight into the hot spring toward her. As the distance closed, their eyes met, and both realized who the other was. Pei Ling screamed internally, but the system had no concept of human shame or social consequences. It forced him to strip off his clothes and leap into the air, splashing down right beside the genius alchemist. Pei Ling was terrified. He knew Jin Sumian's sister was a formidable woman, whose name alone made even the likes of Zhen Jinshan tremble. Fortunately, the system's programming was strictly goal-oriented. It ignored the naked beauty beside it and began frantically absorbing the 9 dark, cold spring water. In the blink of an eye, 3/4 of the precious liquid was drained into Pei Ling's body. To add insult to injury, he didn't leave after the robbery. Instead, he summoned the cold marrow fire right there in the pool, turning her private sanctuary into his personal cultivation chamber. Jin Sumian reached her breaking point. Seeing her resources and her space being snatched away, she decided to risk a cultivation backlash to teach this thief a lesson. She stood up, completely disregarding her lack of clothing, and lunged at him, but the system was far faster. With a single cold movement, Pei Ling reached out and pressed her back down into the water, pinning her there with ease. By the next morning, the session finally ended. The process had been brutal and inhumane, but the results were undeniable. Pei Ling had broken through to the 7th layer of the Foundation establishment realm, and his skeleton had successfully evolved into top-grade jade bones. Now that he was back in control, Pei Ling had a massive headache. He looked at Jin Sumian lying unconscious nearby, and his heart sank. She looked far from fine. Panic set in. in. Knowing she was an alchemist, he began rummaging through her house, leading to a bizarre scene of one undressed person carrying another while searching for medicine. He eventually found a bottle of soul-calming pills. The soul-calming pill, a potent sedative that forces the user into a deep dream-filled sleep for an entire month to nourish the spirit and heal soul trauma. He fed her the pill, hoping a month of sleep would buy him enough time to figure out an apology. But then, a sharp knock sounded at the door. Cold sweat poured down his face. He opened the door to find Lu Chang, Jin Sumian Sr., thinking on his feet. Pei Ling realized she didn't recognize him and spun a wildly narcissistic lie. "It seems Sumian hasn't told you about our relationship yet?" Lu Chang was skeptical. Why would the proud and arrogant Jin Sumian fall for a random 7th layer nobody? Seeing she wasn't buying it, Pei Ling leaned into a lecherous persona, suggesting he was about to head back to the bedroom for some intimate activities, and asked if she wanted to stay and watch. Disgusted and enraged, Lu Chang attacked with a 9-yin white bone claw. In the scramble, Pei Ling reflexively used the vampire vanishing technique to get behind her and subdue her. Lu Chang was stunned. "I'm at the 8th layer, yet he suppressed me instantly," she thought. Maybe Sumian really did pick a hidden genius. She calmed down and asked if Sumian was still going on the Hanshi Mountain Villa mission. Pei Ling knew that if the girl didn't show up, people would come looking for her and find his mess. He lied again, claiming she was exhausted and that he would go to her place. Lu Chang agreed to a meeting time and left, leaving Pei Ling to dwell on his dread. He remembered seeing that mission posted a month ago. If no one had taken it since, it was a death trap. He rushed to Jen Jinshan's courtyard for backup, but at the gate, he was blocked by several wooden puppet figures that looked like they'd recently been used as punching bags. "The patriarch has left the sect and won't return for a while," the puppet droned. Pei Ling tried asking for Ouyang Shangsing or anyone else, but the puppet just repeated the same line over and over. "Can't you say something else? You and that idiotic system of mine must be related," Pei Ling snapped, eventually taking out his frustration on the wooden guard. With no reinforcements, he returned to the meeting point just as Lu Chang arrived. She looked at him with a smirk and asked, "Finished with your task already?" Pei Ling could only offer a pained smile. On the road, as he desperately tried to deflect her questions about his romance with Jin Sumian, Lu Chang finally dropped a bombshell about their destination. Out of all the groups of cultivators who have gone to Hanshi Mountain Villa lately, only one single person has ever come back alive, and that's where this video comes to an end. If this video hits 5,000 likes, I'll continue and fully complete this Manhwa series, so make sure to like the video, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel so I can see how many of you are interested.